What are you doing? That's why that woman's daughter is no good. She's slow to learn, slow to move, and clumsy. I can't stand to watch her. It seems that my mother-in-law, Sally, has a grudge against my mother, and she has been targeting me as well, which is truly unpleasant to the point where I want to cut ties with her. However, I've been tolerating it because I get along well with my father-in-law, Joe, and my brother-in-law, Nick. But I've been putting up with it because she gets along well with Joe and Nick. That was until Sally started playing her schemes. My name is Mary, a 32-year-old housewife. Life was full of various hardships until I married my husband, Tom. We met in middle school. I was living in poverty because my parents' company went bankrupt. On the other hand, Tom was the youngest son of a well-established upscale restaurant owner. His mother-in-law never faced bankruptcy, and he was known as the richest kid in our class. It should have been the other way around. At that time, I thought so and was cold to Tom. But as we were in the same committee and got closer, I'm the youngest son, so my parents don't expect much from me, he said sadly. Seeing Tom like that made me realize that having money doesn't necessarily mean happiness. From then on, I was drawn to Tom, and on the day of our middle school graduation, I confessed to him, and we started dating, continuing even after becoming working adults. However, one day while on a date with Tom, we unexpectedly bumped into Sally. I had hardly seen Sally, maybe only at entrance and graduation ceremonies, so it was almost like meeting her for the first time. Nice to meet you. I'm Mary, dating Tom. I greeted her, but Sally didn't return the greeting and looked at me sternly. I know. I've had your background checked. It's fine to date Tom for fun, but don't think you can become a part of our mother-in-law. Mom, why would you say that? Tom retorted strongly, but Sally ignored him and left. I was trembling with shock and fear, unable to look at Sally's face, and just looked down. However, Tom comforted me, and unexpectedly, this incident strengthened our resolve to definitely get married. Since then, I've gone with Tom to his mother-in-law's house for mother-in-law meetings. But no matter how much we asked, Sally refused to let me enter the property, so we kept visiting until we were allowed. However, mentally, it becomes tough when the situation of being turned away from the in-laws' house once a week continues for a year. Then one day, Sally, who always comes out to refuse us, was bedridden due to illness, and Nick, the eldest son, came out in her place. Mom's asleep, so come on in. Nick casually led us into the house, ignoring Sally's opinion. The house, belonging to a mother-in-law that runs a high-end restaurant, had a stylish and pleasant interior. Joe was in the restaurant's kitchen, and I'll tell him to come home after noon, Nick said, and until then, the three of us chatted. Tom seems to be close with Nick. When Nick talked about their childhood, Tom would get embarrassed, and it seemed like a fun brotherly relationship. Then Sally walked into the living room. What? I told you to turn away any women Tom brings. Sally spoke strongly, but she was coughing, seemingly unwell. There's no need to turn her away. Isn't it rude for Mom not to meet someone who's been coming for a year? Maybe that's true, but Sally, unable to say more, sighed and left the living room. Nick then politely apologized to me. Mary, I'm sorry about Mom. While this was happening, Joe came back and entered the living room, taking off his hat to greet us. Welcome. So, you're Tom's fiancé. What a lovely girl. We all welcome you here. I had thought Joe, being a chef, might be a difficult person, but he wasn't. Not knowing this, I nervously returned a forced mother-in-law, thinking he might be hiding his true self. It turns out only Sally is against the marriage, while Joe is rather welcoming. Though we run a high-end restaurant, we're not a strict mother-in-law. I don't necessarily want the kids to take over the business. Doing what they want and marrying who they love to lead a life without regrets is what's most important. Joe shared his opinion. Then Nick added, "It would be okay with just relatives, but Mom insists the marriage partner must be from a high-status mother-in-law." David might not know, but Mary and Tom have been turned away by Mom every week for the past year. Hearing this, Joe's expression changed. A year. If that's true, it's unforgivable. Bring Sally here. Nick went to call Sally, and she staggered into the living room, clearly unwell. What now? I'm not feeling well today. So be it. Let's keep it short. You've been turning away Mary, who's taken the trouble to visit our house, for a year. Well, it's because her parents ran a company, went bankrupt, and even got into bankruptcy. She doesn't fit in with our mother-in-law. So what? What does her parents' bankruptcy have to do with her? Isn't it wrong to oppose for such a reason? Then Sally, momentarily at a loss for words, brought up something I never expected. The thing is, Mary's mom was my classmate during my school days. I didn't like her. That's why I didn't want to become relatives with her and was waiting for the two of you to give up. Everyone present, not just me, was surprised by this revelation. That's no reason to oppose a marriage. Let's proceed with the mother-in-law meeting. Joe said that, and finally, Tom and I took a step towards marriage. The mother-in-law meeting, held at Joe's upscale restaurant, progressed in a cordial atmosphere. My mother seemed to remember Sally. "Oh, Sally, isn't it? Long time no see." She greeted Sally, but Sally, perhaps still not accepting. "Long time no see." It was cold in her response. Later, my mother told me that Sally used to be the top student in their class, while my mother had the worst grades. Sally often looked down on my mother, saying, "Poor you, not even understanding such a question. I'm so glad I wasn't born as you," and would spread bad things about my mother to other classmates. So my mother was a bit worried about my marrying Tom. I believe a woman's happiness lies in marrying the person she loves. I'm a bit worried about Tom's mom, but let Tom protect you. Her strong words made me vow to be happy with Tom. But my married life was constantly disrupted by Sally. Originally, both Tom and I were company employees, but Sally forced me to quit my job, saying it was because I was getting married. Tom argued against Sally, but her insistence was so strong that, well, I didn't really love my job anyway. I gave in. Then Sally started coming over every day, teaching me how to do household chores in detail. If I didn't do as Sally wanted, she would say, "What are you doing?" That's why that woman's daughter is no good. She's slow to learn, slow to move, and clumsy. I can't stand to watch her. And put me down by bringing up my mother. Could you please not talk about my mom? I retorted, but then she would say, "Oh, you're talking back now? I don't want someone like you with Tom. Will you divorce him?" And present me with divorce papers. Only Tom's section was father-in-lawed out, and I cried when I first saw it, believing it was real. Sally would leave in the evening, and when Tom came home, "Are you really wanting a divorce, signing divorce papers just because Sally told you to?" I confronted him, crying, "I don't know anything about divorce papers. I've never written anything like that." Tom insisted strongly, so the next time Sally brought out the divorce papers as a threat, I decided to check them more carefully. The handwriting looked similar in Lavar, but slightly different from his usual writing. "Sally, could I have those divorce papers? I want to go to the police to verify they're fake. You know, forging official documents is quite a serious crime. After I said that, Sally stopped bringing the divorce papers, but she continued to mock me for being poor and having bankrupt parents, making our mother-in-law and daughter-in-law relationship very strained. Even now, 3 years into our marriage, it seems Sally still doesn't like me. One day, when Sally came to our house, she surprisingly seemed calm, so I immediately became cautious. Then, "Mary, I'm sorry for everything I've done to you," Sally said. "What?" "I've been reflecting on how horribly I've treated you. So, as a gesture of reconciliation, would you like to join a dinner party I'm hosting? It's going to be a women-only gathering at our restaurant, kind of like a ladies' night. It won't be just any women, but wives of company presidents and women who run their own businesses will be there. I also want to make amends with your mom, so please come together." She invited me to the event. Sally seemed genuinely repentant. There's no reason not to forgive someone who is truly sorry. Certainly, there are countless grievances from Sally delaying our marriage by a year, disrupting the married life I envisioned, and making unpleasant comments about my parents. But since Sally was apologizing, I decided to forgive her just this once. I'll let my mom know. That day, Sally left promptly without lingering, and I believed she truly had repented. When I told my mother about it, she said, "We had our issues in the past, but now we're both parents of children, so we might get along. But if that's the case, I'd like to meet just you, me, and her. It feels odd to be with people I don't know." Initially reluctant, I relayed this to Sally and explained the reason. However, Sally seemed unsatisfied and called my mother directly, persuading her until she agreed to go. After the call with Sally, my mother phoned me. Somehow I ended up agreeing to go. I'll go this time, but this will be the last. I found it a bit odd. Would someone who is repentant and wants to apologize really insist on someone's presence despite their reluctance? If Sally had ulterior motives, it would make sense for her to insist, but I couldn't sister-in-law doubt her. I decided to trust Sally, who seemed to have genuinely repented and apologized that day. On the day of the event, I finished a light breakfast and arrived at the restaurant around noon, excited. The meeting time was 1 p.m., but no one was there, so I waited a bit longer. After waiting for 30 minutes and still no one showing up, I called Sally. "Sally, where are you? We're already at the restaurant." "I'm sorry. Some of the attendees needed a ride, and I got a bit lost." "You're driving?" "Sorry about that." "It's fine, I'm on speaker. My phone is on the passenger seat. I'll be there soon, just wait a bit longer," Sally said and ended the call. After another 30 minutes with no sign of anyone, I called Sally again. "Sally, are you still lost?" "I finally found the way, but there seems to be an accident, and I'm stuck in traffic. I think I'll be there in about 30 minutes. Is it okay if we go inside first?" "No. Actually, I wanted to keep it a secret, but there's a surprise set up in the reserved private room, and I don't want it to be seen. Also, I've informed the restaurant, so don't worry about the time." Understanding her point, my mother and I continued to wait outside the restaurant. An hour later, 2 hours after we began waiting, Nick arrived at the restaurant. I heard someone was waiting outside, but I didn't expect it to be Mary and her mom. "What's going on?" Nick appeared to be working, wearing a white chef's jacket and hat. "We're waiting for Sally. She said she got lost and then caught in traffic." "Do you believe that?" "That's Mom's lie. She's been dining in a private room with friends, already on dessert." "What?" Did they start despite missing 2 people? No, the count was exactly right. Then, my mother, usually gentle and calm, showed a terrifying expression I had never seen before. Would you mind taking us to that private room? Nick, turning pale, led us to Sally's room. As Nick quietly tried to open the door, my mother burst in with a loud bang. Everyone looked surprised, and Sally was initially shocked, but then... Oh, you found out? Thank you for waiting 2 hours. I told you to come 30 minutes later than the actual time. Wouldn't it be funny if a miserable mother and daughter were standing outside when we left? But now that it's come to this, there's no helping it. This place is a social venue for the winners. Could the poor people please leave? She looked down on us, smirking and laughing. However, Sally was the only one laughing. None of her about 8 friends were. Then, my mother, with a bright mother-in-law, responded. Is that so? How interesting. I recognize everyone here. Would you mind conveying a message to them? Cancel our deals. Deals? Yes. I know all these people. Some are company owners, others are wives of presidents. As my mother said this, Sally burst into laughter. Amazing, isn't it? You were a president's wife over 10 years ago, right? Are these from that time? But who wants to associate with someone whose company went under? What are you talking about? Yes, my husband once bankrupted his company and is now an employee, but I started my own company 5 years ago and made it big. I'm in business with these ladies here. It was a surprise to see them. You can't do that. You were always bad at school and clumsy. You'll bankrupt it again, won't you? Nobody knows when they might go bankrupt, but for now, it's growing well. Why are you stuck in the past? Don't compare me to my student days. My mother shouted this, and one of the attendees stepped forward. I didn't know about this. My apologies for any disrespect. But my colleagues and I here were unaware of this. We would like to continue a good relationship with your company. She mother-in-lawed and shook hands with my mother, then turned to Sally. Given this, we'll take our leave today. Asserting their disassociation, the women all left the room. Some even left their desserts unfinished, which I felt a bit sorry for. I thought this incident might make Sally reflect a bit, but suddenly she grabbed my arm. Mary! How dare you embarrass me like this, as a daughter-in-law? Angry, I immediately shook off her hand. Please stop! And I showed a reaction of rejection. I believed you when you said you were sincerely sorry and had reflected. But this treatment is the worst, don't you think? I can never believe any apology from you again. I won't be fooled by such tricks, nor will I accept any invitations from you ever again. I had never spoken back to Sally this firmly before, so she seemed quite surprised. I didn't mean it like that. I just wanted you to respect me. I wanted to show you what happens when you mock me. I didn't think you'd get so angry. Please forgive me. Sally apologized again, but I was no longer willing to forgive. I wonder what method you'll use to deceive me next time. It's scary to think about. After that, Sally had nothing to say in return. Would you like to have a meal? I'll prepare a private room. Please wait here. Nick kindly offered and asked us to sit and wait. Both my mother and I, being very hungry, accepted his kind offer. Then, my mother and I enjoyed a lavish course meal, having a wonderful time. Later, the incident was relayed to Joe and Tom by Nick, and Sally seemed to have been severely reprimanded by everyone. Especially Tom, who declared to Sally, I can't stand it anymore. I can't think of someone who hurts my beloved and her mom as my mother. Don't ever associate with me again. I was deeply grateful to Tom for standing up for us. Even Tom's brother, who lives far away, despised Sally for this incident, indicating just how much her actions were against human decency. Joe was particularly appalled and ended up handing Sally divorce papers and kicking her out of the house. Although Sally won't face financial difficulties even if divorced, due to property division, she's now living a lonely life, despised by her sons and abandoned by her relatives. Right after Sally stopped bothering me, I discovered I was pregnant. It seems the stress from Sally had been affecting me. This made me think that Sally had dug her own grave, and in a way, I was thankful for that. Tom was overjoyed about the pregnancy and said, "I'm sorry for all the stress you've endured. From now on, I'll do my best to protect our child and our whole mother-in-law." His words father-in-lawed me with happiness. I too resolved to protect and cherish the happiness of our precious famather-in-lawy.at that time. I thought so and was cold to Tom. Being called by my name just gets my heart racing. It's incredibly thrilling. In the dead of night, I stumbled upon Tanner and Rebecca, frolicking in the back seat of a car in the garage. Shocked by the unbelievable scene before me, I locked the two of them in the garage and headed back to my parents' house. I want to show those two, who've been making a fool of me, what real hell feels like. Back at my parents' house, I explained the situation to my parents and another person, asking for their cooperation in my revenge. Everyone agreed, and I resolved to make Tanner and Rebecca experience true hell. My name is Natasha. I'm a newlywed. I met my husband, Tanner, back in our student days. We were classmates in high school, worked together on committees, and had a few interactions. But that was the extent of our relationship. I never imagined that someone like him would approach me now, as adults. "Natasha, I really do love you," he said. Our relationship began right after graduating high school. During our final cultural festival as seniors, Tanner started to get involved with me, and we began to interact as friends. Despite barely knowing each other, he started pursuing me relentlessly right after graduation. I couldn't understand why a guy who was so popular among girls during our school days would be interested in someone like me. Even when I asked him why, he would simply say he was smitten, never providing a concrete reason. Suspicious of his motives, I spent 6 months investigating, but couldn't find any convincing reasons, and eventually, overwhelmed by his persistence, I accepted his proposal. If I just wanted to date and ditch someone, I wouldn't put in all this effort. "Can't you trust me already?" "I truly love you, Natasha," he said. Hearing those words, I began to consider trusting him. But as a novice in love, it took a lot of courage for me to date someone as popular as him. That's when I turned to my older sister, Rebecca, for advice. Rebecca was beautiful and stylish, rumored to be among the most popular in school, as I heard from her classmates. I thought consulting with Rebecca, who had plenty of experience in love, would help me find the answer. When I talked to her about it, her encouragement felt like a gentle push forward. "Just for dating, a playboy wouldn't spend 6 months. I really think Tanner is serious about you, Natasha. Why don't you accept it?" Rebecca's words convinced me to start a relationship with Tanner. A year went by. In the beginning, Tanner was incredibly kind. He treated me like a princess. He took me to my favorite places, and every anniversary, birthday, and event was celebrated with a surprise, making it feel like a dream. For someone inexperienced in love like me, all these felt like fairy tale moments, and I was thrilled to have taken the chance with him. Until the day we decided to get married. "What's with this filthy room? I like things clean. You know what happens if you turn this place into a dump, right?" After deciding to get married, we bought a new house. Tanner worked as a laborer in his father's company, earning around $40,000 a year. He didn't have the means to buy a house. Yet, disliking used things, Tanner insisted I stretch our finances to purchase a new home. Calling household management a hassle, he dumped all responsibilities on me, living freely himself. This is your house too, so I wish you'd help with the cleaning. I have a job too, so let's support each other, okay? You can at least tidy up, can't you? I work as a nurse with irregular shifts. Tanner actually spends more time at home and earns $30,000 less than I do. Despite the significant differences in time and money, he doesn't cooperate at all. I cover all household expenses, while Tanner only spends his salary on leisure and consumables. Before marriage, he spoke of mutual support and striving together. But after moving in, Tanner changed completely. He became a total freeloader. I once tried to get him to cook, but the taste and his knife skills were disastrous. The house ended up a mess, and I gave up on having him cook. If I let him do the laundry, he'd throw everything in together, causing shrinkage and color bleeding. He was far from trustworthy. Even Mary, my mother-in-law, had concerns, but I never anticipated it being this bad until I saw it with my own eyes. You're the one who told me not to do housework, right? Now you're making it sound like it's my fault when you start getting called out? Initially, I patiently taught him household chores, but Tanner was short-tempered and prone to violence. Just mentioning household tasks triggered such reactions, and out of fear, I once said I'd handle everything myself to avoid his outbursts. But I'm only human. Nursing is many times harder than people think. My stamina has declined since my early 20s, making it tough to balance home life with work. And on top of that, the household chores have more than doubled compared to when I lived alone. I often wish I had extra hands. Is it so wrong to ask for help in such circumstances? Tanner becomes immediately enraged, showing his aggressive side whenever his sore spots are poked. Once, when I dared to stand up to him, he threw things against the wall and almost injured me. I've been scared of him and even considered divorce, but each time he would become uncharacteristically kind, showering me with love as if he were a different person. I'm sorry, Natasha. I'll never do this again. I truly value you. Please don't leave me. I genuinely love you. I can't live without you. Rarely feeling needed by others, I couldn't dismiss such affection from Tanner and saw no alternative but to forgive him. He was the first person I truly loved. I couldn't envision a life with good encounters after losing him. Such thoughts were reinforced by various things said by Rebecca and Tanner during our relationship. No one else would put up with someone like you, Natasha. If you leave Tanner, you might spend your life alone. At that time, I was completely dominated by the thought that no one but Tanner could love someone like me, a belief instilled by his manipulative words. Even when I thought about leaving, memories of our relationship and Tanner's need for me held me back. It's like the saying, the one who falls in love loses. I was completely ensnared by Tanner's manipulative tactics. I want to support you if I can, but housework is just not my thing. I'm counting on you for that. Please don't say such sad things. I'll try to do what I can. He probably noticed my fear after his outburst. As soon as he approached me, he embraced me and gently stroked my hair to calm me. Tanner was skilled at using both the carrot and the stick, always making me feel needed just when I thought all was lost. For someone shy and introverted like me, being needed and loved by someone was a way to affirm my existence. Tanner had great communication skills and was an observant person. He was adept at manipulating someone to the brink of life and death. I was frequently bullied during my school days, which affected my self-esteem. Tanner exploited this, convincing me he was the only one who needed me. He claimed to love and accept even my flaws. Little did I know at the time, this was all part of his manipulative tactics. To be honest, it never even crossed my mind. Until the day I witnessed that scene. As our first wedding anniversary approached, encouraged by my parents, we decided to have a wedding ceremony with Tanner. Rebecca had her wedding at a garden, but where do you plan to have yours? Maybe a church wedding would be nice? The decision to have a ceremony was partly due to my parents' suggestion. Dad and Mom have always been deeply concerned about me. They know I'm the kind to care for others, sometimes at my own expense, readily sacrificing myself for the sake of others. When I became a nurse, they worried if I could truly handle it. You have a kind heart that tends to overdo things. Remember, it's not good to always put others first. Take care of yourself too. Despite their worries, they were my biggest supporters when I decided to become a nurse. Dad's concern also came to the forefront when it came to my marriage. Usually not one to meddle, Dad for the first time wanted to have a serious talk with Tanner and invited him over. Natasha is our treasure. If anything happens to her, I'll never forgive you. Are you prepared to take care of her? Dad didn't hesitate to intimidate Tanner, who seemed nervous. But Tanner didn't flinch and insisted earnestly that he wanted to marry me. I also want a solemn atmosphere for the wedding, so maybe we should look for a church. I know I've been a burden to Natasha, so I want to make the main event especially wonderful for her. Lost in thought, Tanner's voice brought me back to reality. Seeing Tanner smile sheepishly made my heart race. I never imagined he thought that way. Partly because his words and his everyday actions are so different. I wish he would be more kind on regular days and not just on special occasions. If we could just eat together, watch movies in the living room and laugh, I'd be so happy. Why does Tanner have to say such awful things? Does he really love me? Does he really need me? Having little experience with relationships, I kept wondering if something was wrong with me. Maybe Tanner's lack of desire is because I'm lacking in some way. I must try harder. I convinced myself, suppressing any thoughts of confronting Tanner. Contrary to my feelings, Dad and Mom seemed impressed by Tanner's words, looking at him kindly. You're lucky, Natasha, to marry such a good man. My parents thought Tanner was a good husband. And at that time, so did I. It's true, Natasha is so lucky. She's not good at much besides housework. Are you sure you're not missing anything, Tanner? Rebecca, who happened to be there, sat next to Tanner without hesitation. She flirtatiously placed her hand on Tanner's knee and looked up at him. No. That's not true at all. Rebecca is the opposite of me, sociable and beautiful. She's always fashionable and brand conscious. And thanks to her husband who runs an IT company, she lives a lavish lifestyle. Rebecca often looked down on me, belittling me to elevate herself. But she too was adept at getting her way, manipulating me skillfully. Back then, I didn't realize I was being used by Rebecca. I felt happy to be relied on and pampered. Is that so, Natasha? You too shouldn't let go of such a good man so easily either. After all, you're just a burden with no redeeming qualities. Rebecca. Such mockery was a routine occurrence. She used her pretty face and tears as weapons, pushing people away from me. Everyone seemed to side with Rebecca. The only exception was my parents. Mom always scolds Rebecca sharply whenever she mocks me. Seeing no way to turn the situation in her favor, Rebecca quickly leaves the scene, but the pain in my heart lingers. What was a joyful moment is ruined by Rebecca's words. Tanner, along with Dad and Mom, apologizes, but he just laughs it off, saying it's nothing. Deep down, I wish for some comforting words, but I don't have the courage to ask for such audacity. It's my fault, as always, I tell myself, accustomed to resolving things on my own. Time passed and it was now the day before the wedding. The ceremony was set to be held at a church, and today, Rebecca was visiting my house. She said it was closer to the venue from our place. Let's call it a night since it's early tomorrow. I'm borrowing your bed. After having dinner and a shower, we enjoyed some drinks. It was past 10 p.m., and we were all feeling the effects, so we decided to get some sleep. I would share the bed with Tanner, and Rebecca would sleep in my room. Around midnight, with the feeling of warmth vanish from the futon, the chills woke me up. Tanner? It was still autumn, a bit chilly for a nighttime stroll. Maybe he went to the grocery store without saying anything? It was unusual for Tanner to leave like that, so I decided to look around, starting with checking the car in the garage. That's when I heard it. No, Tanner. It sounded like Rebecca's voice coming from the direction of the car. Tanner's car was there, not looking like he went to the grocery store. Thinking Tanner might be nearby since Rebecca called his name, I walked towards the sound. Being called by my name just gets my heart racing. It's incredibly thrilling. I spotted the two in the back seat, engaged in something. Just as I was about to approach and call out, I witnessed an unbelievable scene. Rebecca, can you keep your voice down? It's impossible, Tanner, be gentler with me. The two of them were naked, embracing, caught in the midst of intimacy. Shocked and wordless, I collapsed on the spot. They didn't notice me, completely absorbed in each other. Maybe it was too hot with the windows up, or they needed some fresh air, but the car windows were open. Because of that, Rebecca's sugary voice and Tanner's animal-like breaths were audible. The disturbing sounds filled me with discomfort and nausea, and I crouched down, trying to hold back vomit. What's happening? What are Rebecca and Tanner doing? Is this a dream? Am I having a nightmare? Unable to believe the scene before me, I kept trying to escape reality. Oblivious to my presence, the two continued their act, engrossed in each other. Tanner's desire for Rebecca, something I've never experienced, painfully tore at my heart. And then, from the two of them, I heard words even more horrifying. It's like a dream, to be connected with you like this. You really love me, don't you? You did tell me before that you've admired me since our school days. Rebecca's words, revealing a shocking truth, left me stunned and confused. Were Tanner and Rebecca acquainted since their school days? But how could Tanner have known Rebecca? When I saw you at the cultural festival, you were just too dazzling. I used Natasha to get close to you. When I heard you were married, I couldn't hide my shock. Tanner's words brought back a memory. On the day of the high school festival, Rebecca, who was hunting for boys, visited my class's booth. There, as I played the role of a waitress in a cafe, being teased and mocked by Rebecca, Tanner had fallen for her at first sight. Learning that Tanner had targeted me for use since those days brought tears welling up in my eyes. But now, I'm connected with you like this. When you approached me, it felt like a dream. And to suggest something so wicked, you really are someone not to be underestimated. Hearing this, my astonishment was apparent. Their relationship started with Rebecca seducing Tanner, who knew he had feelings for her. To be with the married Rebecca, Tanner had to marry me, become part of the family, and not arouse suspicion. Rebecca's husband, Scott, often traveled for work and was rarely at home. Becoming relatives with Rebecca, who was nearly free, meant their relationship would raise fewer suspicions. They reflected on the past, discussing their actions. Hearing this unbelievable truth, I quietly moved away from the scene. Unable to contain my tears, I ran to the entrance, weeping, and collapsed once I closed the door. I can't believe that they had been using me all along. And how they thought of me in such a way. It was unforgivable, absolutely unforgivable. Love turned into rage and hatred, and I, holding the keys, headed to the garage where the two of them were. The garage was secured with a shutter, and the entrance was the only way in or out. By the time I returned, both were exhausted, quietly sleeping in the back seat. Perhaps they never thought I would find out. With a sigh at their foolish actions, I slowly closed the shutter and locked it. Then, I headed to my parents' house, not far from here, and poured my heart out to Dad and Mom. What's wrong, Natasha? At this hour? And your clothes? Arriving in my pajamas, Dad was taken aback with his eyes wide. Mom, concerned, immediately let me into the house. Both were somehow awake, which made me wonder. It was unusual for them, with their regular lives, to be up at this time. Had something happened? With that question in mind, I stepped inside, only to find Scott, of all people, sitting on the sofa. Good evening, Natasha. What's going on? Why are you dressed like that? Did something happen? Scott was indeed sincere and a gentleman. Too good for Rebecca, he too must have been deceived into marrying her. As I hesitated about whether to share the day's events, Scott seemed to sense something and spoke up. Did you hear it too? Scott asked. At that moment, my eyes widened in shock. Hear what? This. Scott said, pulling out a recording device. The voices I heard from it left me speechless. So bold to suggest something so wicked, you really are not to be underestimated. It was a recording of the very conversation I had overheard between Tanner and Rebecca. How do you have this? My voice rose in surprise, and I was visibly shaken. Scott, looking uncomfortable, started explaining. Rebecca had been reckless with money and men. He found out 3 months ago when someone from his company reported seeing Tanner and Rebecca entering a hotel. After discovering the affair, Scott hired a private investigator to gather evidence of their infidelity. Today, knowing Rebecca was visiting my house, the investigator intensely monitored her, capturing this recording. At first, I thought if money could make up for my absence and make Rebecca happy, I'd stay out of it. But when Tanner got involved, it was a different story. I couldn't stand it, knowing how much you cared for him. Scott had always cared for me like a real big brother. And he couldn't bear to see me hurt because of them. Just knowing how he cared was a relief to my heart. I was collecting evidence against Rebecca to confront her for a divorce. I got the decisive evidence today and came to discuss it with your parents. Turning to Dad and Mom, I saw them looking distressed. Dad was even apologizing profoundly to Scott. I'm sorry. For Rebecca to do such a thing. We're deeply ashamed as parents. We know an apology won't make up for it. Please, do whatever you feel is necessary to find peace. Watching Mom cry and apologize, my heart ached. Please, lift your heads. It's not your fault. Those who used Natasha and committed these acts are the ones to blame. Though Scott must be hurting too, he remained composed and comforted my parents. After calming them down, he turned to me. Natasha, what are your wishes? I'm fine as long as I can sever ties with Rebecca. But you must want more than that. Yes. My wife seduced your husband. I bear some responsibility. I want to support you fully, so you can find closure. Empowered by his resolute gaze, I declared my desire for revenge. I want to show those two who belittled me what true hell feels like. Overwhelmed with anger and frustration, I let my tears flow freely. Looking up at Scott, I voiced my true feelings for the first time. I want them to taste despair. Leave the financial aspect to me. I'll do everything I can. What do you want to do with those two? Hearing Scott's words, I candidly voiced a plan that had come to mind. I have to say I was surprised at how quickly such a daunting idea had occurred to me. Scott, Dad, and Mom all agreed to cooperate upon hearing it. And so, our family's revenge plan commenced. Natasha! What were you thinking? How dare you lock us up like that? 2 days later, Tanner and Rebecca, finally escaping from the shutter, showed up at my parents' house. They were still in the same clothes from 3 days ago, likely not having showered. Their clothes were wrinkled and faintly sour-smelling. Rebecca's makeup was ruined, her face and attire a mess. Who do you think is responsible for being locked up like that? I calmly responded at the entrance. But my response seemed to infuriate them even more. Shut up! You think you can talk down to me like that, huh? How could you lock us up and leave us for 2 days? If it weren't for the service guy, who knows what could have happened to us? When we went back home, we found strangers and they showed us some contract and told it wasn't our house anymore. What's going on? Explain yourself. The truth was, with Scott's help, that garage was set to be demolished. Since the house also belonged to me, while they were locked up, I moved all the essentials to our family home. The house is now being rented out to an acquaintance. It was designed considering eventual cohabitation with our parents, so it found a tenant quickly due to its excellent accessibility. Tanner's belongings were haphazardly packed into bags and sent to his parents' house. With the people Scott brought in, the work was done swiftly and efficiently. The noise and the stink, give me a break. Just hearing those screams in the morning is enough to stress me out. I grimaced in disgust at their state. Tanner, unable to tolerate my expression, lunged at me. But Scott appeared and grabbed his arm, protecting me. Scott! You two really are despicable. A man who dares to raise his hand against a woman. What kind of character do you have? Aren't you ashamed? Why is Scott here, and even Mom and Dad? It's our family home, so naturally, Dad and Mom would be there. But what truly shocked Rebecca wasn't that. Everyone who used to dote on her now stood behind me, protecting me. She couldn't understand why no one was trying to help her. Don't you realize the situation you're in? What did you say? As Tanner shook off the restraining hand and scowled. Scott played the recording from the other day. What? We were being bugged. But how, where? They didn't have any wearable devices or mobile phones on them, so it seemed impossible that they were bugged. While they were confused, Scott smirked mischievously. I've been aware of your affairs for a while now. That's why I hired an investigator to gather decisive evidence of your infidelity. Upon hearing Scott's words, Rebecca's face turned pale. She thought her affairs had gone unnoticed, never imagining she was under investigation. Overwhelmed by the professionalism of the investigators, Rebecca was speechless, as if engulfed in darkness. Never thought you'd provide such conclusive evidence. I was so surprised, I laughed, Scott said. That's a crime. Yeah. If we report this to the police. Do you two have any evidence of that? Scott countered. Their attempts to intimidate Scott were futile. His firm stance, showing no fear and words sounding like he was about to hunt them down, caused Tanner and Rebecca to falter. If you two, who are financially inferior to me, want to hire a lawyer and go to court, I'm more than ready. If I say I just happened to encounter you and recorded it, it doesn't prove I hired an investigator. If you want to challenge me, gather evidence that could defeat me first. Indeed, a savvy businessperson. His quick thinking is extraordinary. The two, unable to respond, switched their target to me. What about you locking us up? That's a serious crime. Do you have proof? What? Stunned by the question, Tanner was at a loss for words. Now it was my turn to corner them. There's no evidence that I locked you up, but there's proof of your affair on the garage's security cameras. I bet they captured some unsightly footage of you two getting into the car and doing indecent things. Hearing this, the color drained from their faces, and they began to back away in fear. I believed your words for years, thinking you truly cared for me. But it was all an act, just to connect with Rebecca and cheat on me. No, it's not like that. Natasha, please forgive me. I really love and no one else. Me too. What happened with Tanner was just a momentary lapse, nothing serious. I swear it's true. Please believe me, forgive me, Scott. Realizing their disadvantage, the two abruptly changed their tone and started apologizing. They were clinging to our feet, weeping and pleading for forgiveness in their disgraceful state. Let go. What? I said let go. I yelled at Tanner, and Scott shook Rebecca off. Why would anyone forgive you too? No matter what happens, I will never forgive you. No matter how much you apologize or beg, I will never forgive you. Rot in hell with your regrets. With an anger never shown before, the two were thoroughly intimidated and fled the house. Dad and Mom, who had been watching worriedly, came to comfort me, and Scott gently stroked my hair, saying I did well. At that moment, overwhelmed with relief, I broke down in tears. The harrowing days I endured felt like hell itself. Clinging to memories, I tried to endure, but I was reaching my limit. Before breaking down, I managed to end that life, and the feeling of liberation made my emotions erupt. Thus, I successfully executed my revenge on Rebecca and Tanner. They fled to Tanner's parents' house, but as I had already explained the situation, they were denied entry and turned away. Moreover, due to their misconduct, John, my father-in-law, refused to employ him any longer. Tanner was already problematic at the company, so it didn't take long for him to be disowned, as I learned later. Rebecca and Scott soon divorced. Despite Rebecca's pleas until the end, she lacked the financial means to contest the divorce settlement and had no choice but to accept Scott's terms. Naturally, Tanner and Rebecca were charged a significant sum for compensation, considering the cancellation of the wedding and all the preparations that were ruined. Thanks to Scott hiring an excellent lawyer, we managed to make the two sign an agreement ensuring they'd pay up, and now they are both working desperately to fulfill it. I explained the situation to everyone who was supposed to attend the wedding. They were all disillusioned but supportive, offering understanding and assistance. I also made sure to explain the situation to the neighbors when the two were locked in the shutter for 2 days. I didn't want any commotion or the police getting involved, which would jeopardize the plan. Being well liked by the neighbors and Rebecca being known as the unpleasant sister who always looked down on me, everyone sided with me. As a result, Tanner and Rebecca are now viewed coldly by everyone. Once living a lavish life, they now lead a life of poverty, struggling daily, considerably thinner, as I've heard from friends. 4 years have passed since the incident. I'm devoted to my work, and Scott is also busy with his own. Dad and Mom are living fulfilling days, supporting my life and career. They even encourage me to find happiness when I meet the right person, motivating me to look forward. Hoping to make them proud, I'm also investing in self-improvement. Being broke and useless is grounds for divorce. So said Matthew as he left the divorce papers on the table and walked out. I was left staring at those papers, dumbfounded, on my hospital bed. I had my suspicions for a while. But, to think he was actually cheating. And he's leaving me because I'm useless and can't earn money while hospitalized and because Alyson's pregnant? Mom? Startled, I looked up to find my precious son Harlan and my dad standing there. My dad looked at what I was holding and frowned. What are you going to do? There's only one thing to do. With some persuasion, I managed an early discharge and headed to the bank where Matthew works. My dad, who drove me there, cheered me on. You can do it. Then he dropped me off in front of the bank and drove away. As I entered the bank, Matthew, noticing me, frowned. Coincidentally, there were no other customers in front of Matthew. I approached him directly. I'm closing all the company accounts. What? Let's show him whose daughter he's angered. While Matthew turned pale, I couldn't help but smirk. I am Sabrina. A 32-year-old corporate executive and mother of one. I have a 7-year-old son named Harlan and my husband's name is Matthew. Matthew and I met at a party thrown by mutual friends during our college days. Back then, we had no interest in each other and merely exchanged contact information. Hey, weren't you at that party? Sabrina, right? Oh, Matthew? The following year, by coincidence, I used the bank where he worked and we reconnected. That led to us keeping in touch regularly and eventually started dating. After I got pregnant with Harlan, we got married. Matthew was known for his serious and meticulous work, which made my friends envy that I had him as my husband. I, too, was happy to have married him. Mom, why does this become this? Hold on a sec. I don't know that much myself, so I'll look into it. Okay. Harlan, perhaps inheriting traits from Matthew, is studious and curious. He's always asking questions, which keeps me on my toes with my own studies. What's this? Why? Surprisingly, Harlan's admiration is not for Matthew but for my dad. My mother passed away from illness, and my dad, despite his busy work life, raised me as a single parent. I'm sorry, but it's hard to get along with your dad. Well, it can't be helped, but don't say that to him. He's quite sensitive about it. No way, I could. My dad is a kind man but looks intimidating and somewhat scary. Matthew is also not comfortable around him due to his appearance. My dad, aware of this, has always tried not to interfere too much. Thus, our life was peaceful at the beginning, a life that seemed full of promise. But that changed drastically after we got married. Hey! Where did you put my mobile phone? Don't say it like I'm responsible for it. Isn't it still on the charger? Right after waking up, Matthew would ask grumpily. Indeed, his mobile phone was where he left it charging the night before. No apologies or thanks from him, just a click of his tongue, which irritated me. Matthew changed after we got married. And whenever he had the chance, he would say this. I'm an elite banker. Thanks to me, you're living a comfortable life. Yet Matthew doesn't contribute financially at home. He spends his entire salary on himself, yet acts as if he's supporting the household. In reality, I'm the one supporting our family. I pay for all the utilities and groceries. Hey! What's with these new clothes? They're for Harlan. He's outgrown his old ones. Don't spend my money on luxuries. I'm paying with my own salary. I don't even have access to your account. Yet, if I take Harlan out for a meal or buy new clothes, he immediately complains. He seems to dislike any form of luxury, no matter how small. On the other hand, my dad is the type of person who's willing to spend money for our sake. The apartment you're in now is too small, right? That's why I bought the condo you and Matthew wanted to live in. And it's not far from my place, so I could be close with you guys. He said, laughing, and gave us the top floor as a gift. And to be there for us in times of need, he lives on a different floor in the same building. Mom, can I go to Grandpa's? Of course, but just because it's the same building doesn't mean you can stay out late. Make sure you come back before it gets dark. Okay. It might be natural for Harlan to be closer to his grandfather than his father, Matthew. Whenever he has the chance, Harlan goes to see my dad. Where's Harlan? At Dad's place. Is that so? Matthew never complains about my dad to him directly. And it seems he's careful not to say too much around Harlan, fearing he might tell my dad. It's just me he's bold with. Certainly, I keep quiet not to trouble my dad. Well, if it's just complaints, I can ignore them. That's how lightly I thought of it as. And so unlike my dad, Matthew doesn't participate in childcare at all. I've been called out by Alyson, so I'm heading out. What? Again? And it's Matthew's childhood friend Alyson who's stealing away his time from childcare. I dislike her, more than just being uncomfortable around her. Matthew and I are like siblings. So please don't misunderstand. Every time she meets me, she would say something like that. Yet, she always tries to assert her dominance. Matthew used to be. As if she knows Matthew better than I do, which is just annoying. Valeria, Matthew's mother-in-law, also dotes on Alyson, which complicates things further. Why did Matthew choose such a woman instead of Alyson? He should have married Alyson. When called to my in-laws, Valeria made sure to say such things loud enough for me to hear. John, my father-in-law, always scolds her for it, but she doesn't seem to care. Alyson claims to be a natural airhead. I'm just a natural airhead, that's why I rely on Matthew so much. I don't mean to make Sabrina uncomfortable. This might be okay if she were younger. But she's 28, not exactly young. It's time she acted her age. The reason she and Matthew didn't end up together is because of John. I don't want such a woman even as an in-law. If it really comes down to it, I'll divorce you. Alyson can hardly be called as a good person. She's notorious for playing around with men and doesn't work either. Whatever she wants, she gets Matthew to buy for her. John despises Alyson and strongly opposed their relationship. I could never understand why Valeria adores Alyson so much. I'm sorry for my wife's behavior. It's not something you should apologize for, John. Matthew too. To not defend his wife from such remarks, and instead, being friendly with such a woman. True to John's words, no matter what Valeria says about me, Matthew never defends me. Sometimes, he even laughs. Why do you say those things, Grandma? If Mom and Dad hadn't met, I wouldn't be born. Does that mean I'm an unwanted child to you, Grandma? No, that's not true at all. Harlan always stands up for me in place of Matthew. Harlan may not understand how children are made, but he knows they can't be born without both parents. Valeria adores her brilliant grandson, so she refrains from making such remarks in front of Harlan. In that aspect, Valeria and Matthew are very alike, making it seem they really are related. I have plans to drink with Alyssa tonight, so I'll be home late. Oh, really? Gradually, I started to wonder if Matthew was necessary for us at all. And I began preparing for divorce. Harlan seemed to sense something too. If there's anything I can help with, just let me know, he said, showing concern for me. Then, I was summoned by Valeria. I really didn't want to go, but she kept calling persistently enough that it would affect my work if I didn't show up. John is away on business, so there's no one to carry heavy things. Can you buy some rice? Apparently, John was on a business trip. I wanted to tell her to just order it online, but saying that would clearly lead to an argument. After being tasked with carrying heavy items after work, I was exhausted. As I was heading back to the condo in a daze, my body was thrown by a car. It seems a car that ran a red light hit me. The driver who hit you fled the scene, and we're currently investigating. I was informed while lying in a hospital bed. For now, I left Harlan in my father's care and decided to stay in the hospital for a while. I broke my arm, so I couldn't work properly in this state. When I was being worried about such things, my dad scolded me. First, worry about your own health. Harlan, my father, and John, who came back in a hurry after hearing about the accident, visited me frequently, but Matthew and Valeria did not visit me at all. Well, that was within my expectations. Coming in. What? So, I was surprised when Matthew showed up in my hospital room. Sign this. Matthew presented me with divorce papers. Already signed by him, with Valeria's name as a witness. With that arm, you won't be able to work. Now that you can't make money, you're useless to me. What is that supposed to mean? And besides, Alyssa is pregnant with my child. My thoughts froze at those words. Alyssa is pregnant with Matthew's child. I'm going to marry Alyssa. So just sign this quickly. Saying that, Matthew turned his back on me. As if I was of no further use to him. Being broke and useless is grounds for divorce, Matthew said as he left the divorce papers on the table and walked out. I was left staring at those papers, dumbfounded, on my hospital bed. I had my suspicions for a while. But, to think he was actually cheating. And he's leaving me because I'm useless and can't earn money while hospitalized and because Alyssa's pregnant? Mom? Startled, I looked up to find my precious son Harlan and my dad standing there. My dad looked at what I was holding and frowned. What are you going to do? There's only one thing to do, I answered while looking straight at my dad. My dad nodded in agreement. Well then, let's fight back. With some persuasion, I managed an early discharge and headed to the bank where Matthew works. My dad, who drove me there, cheered me on. You can do it. Then he dropped me off in front of the bank and drove away. As I entered the bank, Matthew, noticing me, frowned. Coincidentally, there were no other customers in front of Matthew. I approached him directly. I'm closing all the company accounts. What? Matthew's expression clearly said, what are you talking about? Without taking a number, I stood directly at the counter, noticing a few annoyed glances from others. Oh, excuse me. Maybe you didn't understand without the company name. What are you? I'm Sabrina Gibney. I recently took over my father and became the CEO. The company is Gibney Corporation. What the? Gibney Corporation is an IT company my father founded, now employing 1,900 staffs. And is quite well known in this area and within the industry due to its rapid growth in one generation. That's why Matthew was so surprised. That's a lie, right? You're just trying to get back at me. If you think so, why don't you check? Matthew started checking something immediately at my words. While he was busy, I looked around. Having mentioned the company name, the surrounding people were now paying attention to us. Oh my God, what? No way. It seemed he had confirmed it. Matthew looked up at me hesitantly. You're really from that Jibney Corporation? Let's show him whose daughter he has angered. Contrary to Matthew's pale face, I smirked unpleasantly. That's right, so please proceed with the cancellation quickly. Wait, if you cancel all at once like this. By the way, my father is quite angry about this matter as well. Quickly pack your things and leave the apartment. What? Why should I be the one to leave? It seems Matthew had forgotten that the apartment was purchased by my father, and the ownership was in my father's name. Otherwise, he wouldn't have brought Alyssa in while I was hospitalized and still be living there. Forgot? That apartment was bought by my father, the former president. You haven't contributed any money, let alone for living expenses. You've been spending everything on your childhood friend and mistress, Alyssa. In fact, you've been living on my salary. Who do you think has been supporting your lifestyle? Well, about that. And now, because she's pregnant, you expect me to hand over the apartment to you and your mistress? How much more do you intend to insult me? I made sure to speak loudly enough for those around to hear. And of course, Matthew was flustered. After all, he's known for being serious. That he, of all people, wouldn't contribute financially at home and was cheating with a childhood friend. The looks we received from those around us turned cold. Is that true? What? The one who approached me was Ogden, the branch manager of this bank. He had been here for a while, listening to our conversation. I believe we need to have a detailed discussion. I am very sorry for the inconvenience caused by our bank employee. And with that, Ogden offered a deep apology. Following this, I was taken to the back to discuss further with Matthew, Ogden, and myself. There, I explained the situation to Ogden in detail. I am terribly sorry for the trouble our employee has caused. Ogden sighed deeply and apologized again. Next to him, Matthew sat looking displeased, and to that, Ogden forcibly grabbed his head to make him apologize. I understand your feelings, Sabrina. It's natural not to want to entrust your money to a bank that employs such people. If you're considering closing your account, we can arrange that. I am no longer his wife. If you accept one condition, I might reconsider closing the account. The two of them looked up hopefully at my words. It was a good deal for Ogden, but the worst possible condition for Matthew. If you fire Matthew here, I would like to continue my contract with this bank. What? Of course. We were actually planning to let him go. It seemed Ogden had already intended to do so. Matthew, initially confused, gradually turned red in the face. As he was about to say something. Excuse me, but Sabrina's father has arrived. Another bank employee approached us. I had asked Ogden to let him in, thwarting Matthew, who, frustrated, closed his mouth. Why do I have to be here? What? Mom? Sorry for making you wait. Dad entered, firmly holding Valeria's arm. Valeria, looking displeased, glared at me upon seeing me. This is your doing. What are you trying to accomplish? I'll never forgive you for treating your mother-in-law like this. Quiet. As Valeria began to shout, my dad fiercely scolded her. Giving an even more intimidating look, he managed to silence them. I know you've been harassing my daughter. Calling her for trivial tasks, making her carry heavy things. Despite this, instead of showing gratitude, you prefer to listen, and you made sure my daughter heard it. And Matthew, far from defending, laughed, and even Harlan had to step in to protect her. My dad's angry voice echoed through the bank. Matthew tried to intervene but remained silent under my dad's stern gaze. And I'm aware that Alyssa is the one who hit Sabrina. That woman has already been arrested by the police. Could Alyson really have done such a thing? Why are you surprised? You're the mastermind. My dad scolded at her even more. Meanwhile, Matthew, seemingly unaware, froze in shock. What? You both are the worst. Sabrina, let's go. Yes. Prompted by my dad, we headed outside. Ogden followed, apologizing repeatedly. Thinking I might continue the contract with Ogden in charge, we heard Matthew and Valeria arguing loudly behind us. It seemed they were blaming each other. Their voices could be heard outside, and the customers and bank employees who were present whispered that what they had heard was true. Just as planned. Yes. They reacted just as we expected, which helped. Our plan had gone smoothly, and we left the bank laughing confidently. As a result, Matthew was indeed fired. Thanks to the police conducting a thorough investigation, Alyson received a prison sentence. As for Valeria, she was forced to divorce John after it was discovered she had instigated Alyson to run me over in an attempt to get rid of me. Valeria was also taken into custody by the police. Welcome back, Mom, Grandpa. I'm home. Thank you for looking after Harlan, John. No problem. Seems like you've settled everything at the bank. After cornering Matthew and his accomplices at the bank, I went to pick up Harlan, whom I had left with John. John had helped a lot this time too. He found evidence that Valeria was instigating Alyson and discovered notes about their plan to eliminate me, which he handed over to the police. When I thanked him for everything, John said with a smile, "You did great." Since then, my days have become busier than ever. Being busy as a next-in-line president and a board member already, becoming president has added even more responsibility on me due to Matthew. And as for my dad, he started a new company. I've always wanted to start a new company, he said, pushing the presidency onto me, eager to show Matthew up. Because of that, both my father and I became busy, so John has been looking after Harlan. Apparently, John's business trip was forced upon him because Valeria was having an affair with his boss. He took early retirement and moved into a vacant apartment in our building. I'm currently studying about remote work. Planning to eventually entrust him with work, I've sent someone knowledgeable his way. He seems very capable, so I'd like him to excel in my new company. It seems my dad and John got along very well after this incident, often visiting each other's apartments to drink and chat. On the other hand, Matthew, having been driven out, returned to his empty family home. Unable to find employment at any bank with rumors spread by my dad and I everywhere, he was left unemployable, forced to pay me compensation through debts. Now, spending his days tirelessly working part-time jobs, he came crying to us, but we collectively ignored him. Once rumored to be on the fast track to becoming a branch manager, he has fallen far. When I grow up, I want to be like Grandpa. Harlan has come to respect my dad even more after this incident. Seeing him as a hero for rescuing us from the malicious acts of Matthew and Valeria. Would you take over for Grandpa someday? Yes. Hearing Harlan's willingness to follow in his footsteps, my dad was overjoyed. Determined not to be outdone by my father, I resolved to work even harder. Eventually, both my company and my father's company settled down. Oh, welcome home, Mom. Welcome back, looks like you worked hard. When I come home exhausted, I find John had already prepared dinner for us. I helped today too. Really? That's great, Harlan. I'm looking forward to dinner. Praising Harlan's effort with a smile, my dad also returned home late. Then, the four of us sat around the dining table, chatting and eating dinner together. In stark contrast to us, Matthew and his accomplices were scattered. Matthew piled up debts upon debts, eventually becoming indebted to a loan shark. And I heard rumors he was put on a ship. Matthew's family home was sold to pay off his debts, and Valeria, now without a place to go, was spotted living under a bridge by an acquaintance. By the way, I received an apology letter from Alyson's parents. They're good people, I hope you'll read it. If you say so, John. According to the letter from Alyson's parents, she gave birth in prison. They took the child in, and after Alyson's release, they moved away to ensure she wouldn't rely on them. The letter contained deep apologies to me. Alyson's parents seem like very good people. I sincerely hope the child grows up to resemble their grandparents rather than their parents. Nonetheless, Alyson too has lost a place to return to. I hope she reflects on her sins in her solitude. Time passed by and it had been 10 years since the divorce. We've grown without being troubled by Matthew. Did I even have a dad? Apparently, he vaguely remembers Matthew's existence but considers irrelevant to his life. And I too have completely forgotten about his existence. I've decided to take over Grandpa's company after all. If that's what you've decided, I won't object. Harlan chose to inherit my dad's company, which was originally a company making toys. Starting as an ordinary employee, Harlan is valued for his constant flow of ideas. Maybe it's time to leave the company in Harlan's hands. My dad would say so in a laugh. Once he hands over the company to Harlan, he plans to live a quiet life in the countryside. I'm also finding a successor and teaching them my job earnestly. Once they've grown enough, I too might consider early retirement and start a new path. With that thought of future in mind, I will continue to work as the CEO. Mom's been in an accident and taken to the hospital. Please, can you drive me there? I pleaded with my husband, tears streaming down my face. I had just received word that my mother was in a critical condition, unconscious after a traffic accident. However, upon hearing the situation, my husband responded, "I can't, I'm off to a company trip now," bluntly refusing my desperate request. Even as I persisted, he mocked me, saying, "The trip is more important to me. Visiting someone else's mother in the hospital is a waste of time. I'm definitely not going. My name is Jane. I'm 29 years old. My husband, Ben, who is a year older than me, and I got married 2 years ago, both of us working full-time. We met in the same university club. Although the club had many members and it was hard to talk to everyone, we ended up sitting next to each other at a drinking party one day, which led to us becoming close. We also discovered that we both were only children who grew up in single-mother households after losing our fathers early, which quickly brought us closer together. We started going out more and naturally progressed to dating. When we both became comfortable in our jobs as working adults, Ben proposed. Neither of us is currently thinking about children since we're both focused on our careers. However, we do want them eventually and have talked about buying a detached house when the time comes, shortly after getting married. Currently, we're renting an apartment and live close to both of our parents' homes. Since both our fathers have passed away, our mothers, Sarah and my mother-in-law Mary, live alone but have become very good friends. Their similar experiences of not remarrying and raising a child on their own seem to click. And since our family meeting, they've developed a friendship like no other, often meeting for tea or traveling together. I never expected them to get along so well, but seeing my mother happy with Mary makes me glad they met. Mary is also very fond of me, and we have a good relationship. However, Ben isn't too thrilled that Mary seems to prioritize my mother over him. He has quite the mama's boy trait. I knew from his behavior even before we got married how much he cherished his mother, which I understood, coming from a single-mother household myself. But shortly after we started living together post-marriage, I discovered his true nature. One holiday, I received a message from my mom with a photo attached, saying she was having lunch with Mary. Having lunch with Mary now? I read the message, accompanied by a photo of the two of them smiling, which naturally brought a smile to my face too. "Hey, Ben. Looks like Mary and my mom are having lunch. Look, she sent a photo." I said, showing the image to Ben, who was at home at the time. However, his mood soured immediately upon seeing it, and he clicked his tongue in annoyance. What's this? Some kind of spite against me? Huh? What are you talking about? At that time, I hadn't realized Ben disliked my mother. True, Ben often didn't talk much in front of my mother. But I thought it was because we were newly married and he was just nervous. I never imagined he would resent my mother simply because she got along well with his own. Lately, every time I invite Mom out for a meal, she turns me down saying she has plans with Sarah. Doesn't your mother know the meaning of restraint? I was shocked to hear Ben think this way and speak ill of my mother. Mary, too, seemed to have realized early on that Ben disliked my mother. There was a time when we were dining out as a group, and Ben made a snide remark towards my mother, which Mary couldn't stand and scolded him. Ben, what is this attitude towards Sarah? Enough is enough. What? You always side with this person. Haven't you always said I'm your precious son? It's not funny preferring someone you've recently become close with over your own son. Ben retorted, but I honestly found his attachment to Mary to be unnaturally strong. Later, when Ben wasn't around, Mary apologized to my mother and me. I think I've spoiled that boy too much. I'm truly sorry. There's no need for you to worry. I'm not bothered by it either. Ben really loves you. My mother, being gentle-natured and not prone to anger, seemed to accept the situation without blame. However, I could tell right away that she was hurt inside. And Ben, without considering my mother's feelings, progressively worsened his behavior over time. Although Mary would defend my mother, preventing Ben from openly attacking her, he would complain to me whenever my mother and Mary seemed close, eventually even starting to regularly speak ill of my mother. Not long into our second year of marriage, I couldn't take it anymore and had a huge argument with Ben. After a fierce exchange of words, the fundamental issues remained unresolved. And since then, our relationship has become awkward, with less conversation than before. Lately, I've noticed Ben's been coming home late and going out alone on weekends more often. Feeling something was off, I asked him directly. Work's been busy. Lots of overtime and working on weekends lately, he said. Despite his explanation, I couldn't shake off my feeling of unease. Then, one Sunday, when we both had the day off, I noticed Ben packing early in the morning. It seemed he wasn't going to work after all. Just as I was about to ask why he was packing, my phone rang with a call from an unknown number. Curious, I answered, only to find out it was the police. After confirming I was Sarah's daughter, the officer on the line dropped a bombshell. Actually, Sarah has been involved in a traffic accident. My mind went blank. Mom! She was already taken to the hospital, in a critical condition and unconscious. After getting the hospital's name, I managed to end the call with trembling hands. Tears started to overflow as I struggled to think, but knew I had to get to the hospital. However, I don't have a driver's license, so I desperately begged Ben for a ride. Ben, something terrible has happened. Mom's been in an accident and taken to the hospital. Please, we need to go now. But upon hearing the situation, Ben made a face of displeasure and said, What? I'm about to leave for a company trip. I'll be late for the meetup. Deal with it yourself. Flatly refusing my request. A company trip? Today? You never mentioned anything. I realized why he was packing, but I hadn't been informed about the trip at all. And to my shock, he mentioned the trip would last 2 weeks. How can you think of going on a trip at a time like this? Mom might. Enough. The trip is more important to me. Your mother is just an unrelated stranger to me. Visiting someone I hate is a waste of time, and I'm definitely not going. Ben hurled cruel words at me, scoffing. Get out of the way. I have a plane to catch and I'm busy. He pushed past me, whistling as he packed his clothes into a suitcase. Furious, I yelled, "You're the worst! Just do whatever you want!" and left the house, hurrying to the hospital by taxi. Ben went on his trip as planned, oblivious to the crisis unfolding around me. I tried calling him multiple times over the 2 weeks, but couldn't get through. When Ben returned home in high spirits 2 weeks later, I gave him a cold look. Now I have to give Mom her souvenirs. I wonder if Mom's doing okay, he said optimistically. Without responding, I quietly agreed to go with him to his mother's house. On the way, Ben happily talked about all the souvenirs he bought for Mary. Ben didn't say a word of concern about my mother, who had been in an accident. Upon arriving at his parents' house and trying to open the door, Ben stopped, puzzled. Huh? Why is it locked? It seemed unusual for the door to be locked, since Mary usually didn't lock it when she was home. Is Mom not here? Ben murmured. I pushed past Ben, pulled out the spare key I had for their house from my bag, and unlocked the door. Hey! Why do you have the keys to the house? Ben looked bewildered, but I didn't respond. Entering the house before me, Ben tilted his head in confusion upon not seeing Mary. Doesn't something feel off? As Ben moved towards the bedroom, I stopped him. Not that way. This way, I said, leading him to the living room, where a new portrait of the deceased Mary was displayed. What? Stunned, Ben began to tremble, and, half crying, rushed to the portrait, turning to me. Hey! What's going on? What is this? I sighed deeply, holding back my anger, and explained. Mary passed away while you were on your trip. The funeral's already over. Ben glared at me, furious. Don't joke around. How can this be? Why does Mom have to die? Wasn't it your mother who was in the accident and in critical condition? If anyone was supposed to die, it should have been her. Despite Ben's outrageously insensitive outburst, I calmly explained what happened after my mother's accident. My mom woke up after the accident. She had a fracture and is currently undergoing rehabilitation but is gradually recovering. Though my mother was still hospitalized, she was slowly getting better thanks to the medical staff's efforts. But Ben was unsatisfied. Then why did Mom have to? He asked. It seems that on the day my mom had her accident, she was on her way to our house. She fell from a pedestrian bridge. And I hesitated before answering. I guess you had told Mary about going on a business trip, hadn't you? Yeah, I did mention it, but... Mary had been suspicious of you lately. You've been unreachable more often. She probably wanted to verify if you were really going on a business trip. I explained, and Ben looked shocked. According to Mary a month ago, Ben used to call or message her daily, but recently, communication had almost stopped. Mary had trouble reaching him by phone, and on the rare occasions he did call back, he would quickly say he was busy and hang up. Mary thought Ben, being of a certain age, might have naturally become less dependent on his mother. However, she suspected Ben might be hiding something. With her suspicions growing, Mary decided to check if the business trip story was true. Coincidentally, around the same time I received the call about my mother's accident. Mary, who passed away, had brought souvenirs from a day trip she took with my mother last month, intending to give them to us. That day, I was too distraught to think of anything but getting to the hospital. So I didn't have the chance to inform Mary about my mother's accident. Mary must have taken the bus to the stop closest to our apartment and then walked the rest of the way. There's a pedestrian bridge on the way, and it seems she fell while climbing it. A witness said she missed a step just before reaching the top and tumbled down. Though an ambulance was called immediately, she had hit her head hard. And that's how Mary died. After explaining this to Ben, I glared at him intensely. After learning about Mary, I called you numerous times. Over these 2 weeks, no matter how I tried to contact you. You never answered your phone or replied to any messages. Because there were no other relatives to take on the role, I had to act as the chief mourner at Mary's funeral. With my mother still in a critical state, I had to somehow get through Mary's funeral without her real son. You've been ignoring all contact for 2 weeks, just out having fun, right? This has shown me exactly who you are. I'm divorcing you. Upon declaring this, Ben collapsed to the ground, crying loudly. How can you say that right after Mom died? Now's not the time for divorce talk, is it? I didn't contact you because I was always with my coworkers. I had no time. As Ben sobbed and made excuses, my anger only grew. Stop lying! I raised my voice and pulled out a piece of paper from my bag, thrusting it in front of Ben. It was the itinerary for the company trip I found in Ben's room. It says here the company trip was from the 12th to the 19th for 1 week. But you were gone from the 5th to the 19th. You said just before leaving it was for 2 weeks, right? So what were you doing and where were you from the 5th to the 12th? Well, that's... I know. You were cheating, weren't you? And you spent that week with your affair partner, right? As I spoke with certainty, Ben, who had stopped crying, began to panic. What are you talking about? Cheating. I took leave for the remaining week to go on a trip with friends. See, work's been busy, and I needed a break. Fed up with Ben's continued excuses, I pulled out a mobile phone from my pocket. The moment he saw it, his face turned pale. This mobile phone belonged to Ben, found in his closet while he was away on the trip. Likely, there was another mobile phone in his bag, prepared specifically for communicating with his affair partner. Ben had previously claimed he couldn't contact me while on his trip due to lack of time. But he had left his regular mobile phone at home, making it impossible for him to notice any calls. You've been lying through your teeth. You left this phone at home to spend time with your affair partner, didn't you? As I placed the mobile phone in front of Ben, he began to tremble and slammed his fist on the table. Yeah, that's right. I've been fed up with you for a long time. I've got someone else I love now. He shouted defiantly, and then, and how did you know where to find the mobile phone? Don't tell me you searched my room while I was away. He yelled, which was exasperating. I looked at Mary's portrait and silently apologized to her for showing such a scene before speaking up. Mary told me. At that, Ben choked on his words. After a big fight with Ben over my mother, he started coming home late and going out alone on his supposed workdays off more often. Suspecting something was off due to his increased unavailability, I had confided in Mary. Mary, sharing her suspicions about Ben, had advised me. Ben has had a habit since he was little of hiding things that are inconvenient for him, like bad test scores or a glass he broke that his father cherished. He's always securely hidden such things in the closet. If you find a bunch of towels there, it's likely he's hiding something among them. After Mary passed away, I remembered her words, checked Ben's closet, and sure enough, found the mobile phone. I can't believe Mom would tell you such a thing. Ben was visibly distressed, not having expected Mary to doubt him. However, seeing his dismayed state didn't sway me. I will be seeking a divorce and compensation. I'm prepared to consult a lawyer and take this to court if necessary, I stated firmly, conveying my resolve. Ben groaned but, realizing he had no way out, reluctantly agreed. Afterwards, we properly divided our assets, and the divorce was finalized. However, the following month, just as I was settling into my new life, I received a call from Ben. Reluctantly answering, I heard Ben plead. Jane! Please, I need your help. What's the matter, exactly? He explained he was in trouble at work after they found out about Mary's funeral. Since Mary had been listed as Ben's dependent, her death and the necessity of returning her insurance card to the company meant that her death was only then reported to the company, revealing that the funeral had taken place during the company trip. Ben was seen as a disrespectful son who didn't attend his own mother's funeral or even show up, garnering cold looks from his colleagues at work. Yet, Ben lied there too, shifting the blame by claiming I hadn't informed him about Mary's funeral. However, hastily sharing different stories with different people only made things worse. His inconsistencies and contradictions eventually unraveled, revealing his lies. Already viewed as inconsiderate, his repeated dishonesty led to doubts about his character, resulting in his isolation and eventual resignation to escape the situation. Now, without income, Ben is living off Mary's inheritance back at his parents' house. But the fact I didn't attend the funeral is known throughout neighborhood, making me feel ostracized. So, I thought about selling the house, but that's proving difficult. Ben is now recognized by the neighbors as the worst son, feeling awkward even just walking outside. He had planned to sell the family home quickly, but due to its age, there is a lack of interest from buyers. I'm really struggling right now. So Jane, let's start over. Remarry me and let's live together. Hearing this, I was disgusted. He was only reaching out because his situation had worsened. Don't be ridiculous. I've had enough of you. I will never remarry you. Please. I can't go on like this. I don't care about you anymore. You should just live with your affair partner. Rejecting him outright, Ben started to falter. No, we've already broken up. Apparently, the affair partner learned about Mary's funeral and, subsequently, that she was the other woman. Ben had hidden his marital status, leading to her anger and their breakup, leaving him alone. It's your fault. I don't want to be with someone like you. Goodbye. As I was about to hang up. Wait! If you won't agree to remarry, I'll come to your house and argue in person. You're at your parents' place, right? Ben threatened. But I'm not. I immediately responded. Where are you then? I won't tell you. Also, I've recently changed jobs, so lying in wait at my old company is useless. I've already asked everyone to call the police if you show up after my resignation. I decided to sell my parents' house to distance myself from Ben, despite the low likelihood of finding a buyer due to its age. So with my mother's consent, we sold the land after demolishing the house. My mother, having recently been discharged from the hospital, is deeply saddened by the loss of her close friend, Mary. Thus, we moved to a quiet place to live together. And I switched jobs accordingly. Then at least tell me where you are. After all, I've received care from your mother, and I want to visit her. Ben was desperate to find out where I was, but his words only infuriated me. And I was surprised by how cold my response was. Received care? After you've been nothing but trouble for Mom. Don't start saying convenient things now. Besides, Mom has said she never wants to see you again. What? Wait a minute. Jane. Ben was still trying to say something, but I mercilessly ended the call. I then blocked his number and changed mine a few days later. Later, I found out that Ben was being sued for compensation by the affair partner he deceived. And he was in a dire situation. Unable to borrow money due to lack of employment. He's been doing day labor and part-time jobs while searching for full-time work. My mother and I have started a new life in a new place. Relieved to have cut ties with Ben and reminiscing about Mary without stress. Mom couldn't attend Mary's funeral, nor has she been able to visit Mary's grave since her hospital stay and the move have kept us busy. It seems she hasn't fully accepted Mary's death, often crying while looking at photos and videos of them together. I really want to visit Mary soon, she said sadly, so I replied. Yes, we should visit her grave soon. Planning to ensure we don't accidentally encounter Ben. I'm looking forward to making our new life in this new place fulfilling while supporting my mother. On the day we celebrated the 50th wedding anniversary of my in-laws, I arrived late and pulled along my son to introduce him to my sister-in-law, Abigail. This is my son, Mark. Mark, say hello. I'm Mark, I'm 5 years old. Mark clung to me and looked at Abigail, shyly greeting her. Abigail, as I mentioned in my letter, my son has a congenital disability. Before I could finish, Abigail blurted out. EW, what a monster! Don't let it spread to my kids. In that moment, both Mark and I froze as if time had stopped. Abigail's husband didn't say anything, but his look of discomfort was evident, clearly wanting to keep his distance. Kevin and the in-laws were speechless and rigid. I couldn't believe what was being said to such a young child, filled with disbelief. Not knowing what to say to the insensitive remarks of Abigail and her company. I stood there motionless until I heard a voice from beside me. Do people hate me again? Mark looked down, desperately trying to hold back tears. Such words would hurt an adult, let alone a child. It's not contagious. He has albinism, which just means he was born with less pigment. It's still a disease, it can spread. Scarlett, get rid of that ugly kid fast. Get out. My husband was trembling with anger. During the heated argument, tears fell from Mark's eyes. Interrupting Kevin, who seemed ready to confront Abigail, my father-in-law Robert spoke up. Yes, don't ever come back. The relief was visible on Abigail and her husband's faces. They smiled triumphantly as if they had found someone who understood them. But their smiles quickly turned to surprise. What? Dad, what are you doing? My name is Harper, a 40-year-old housewife living with my husband, Kevin, and our son, Mark. Only 5 years ago, the thought of living happily as a family of 3 was unimaginable. Kevin and I had always wanted children but were unable to conceive. I desperately wanted a child, and so did Kevin, which led us to seek fertility treatments at a hospital. There were days when it was hard to see pregnant women in the waiting room, reminding me that children are a gift. Despite careful diet and health management, I often wondered why I couldn't have a child, leading to days filled with self-loathing. The fertility treatments were not only emotionally taxing but also a financial burden, leading to many tearful nights. During those times, the person who was always there to support me was none other than Kevin. His encouragement, holding my hand, and accompanying me to the hospital were incredibly reassuring. It's okay, I'm sure our baby is just waiting for the right time to come to us. Miraculously, his words gave me hope, and I became more positive. The following year, our efforts paid off, and I became pregnant. We sharing the news with my in-laws Robert and Chloe, who were overjoyed. The baby grew healthy inside me, and we looked forward to the delivery day. On the day of birth, hearing the lively cries, I was deeply relieved and eagerly wished to see the baby's face. Yet, the child born had skin and hair so white and delicate, it seemed touching could break them, like an angel. Needless to say, Kevin and I were astonished. We were confused, as no one in our families had such an appearance.
Why?
The doctor explained our child had oculocutaneous albinism, a congenital condition known as albinism.
Albinism? The one that happens to 1 in 20,000 people.
It's a disease associated not just with physical appearance but also vision problems and sensitivity to sunlight. I regretted not being able to give birth to a normal child after fertility treatments. However, seeing the baby, all that faded away, and we embraced our child fully.
It doesn't matter if it's a rare disease. Our child is as beautiful and precious as an angel.
Exactly. This child chose us. Thank you, thank you. Thus, Kevin and I accepted our long-awaited baby positively and with hope. We named the child Mark and decided to raise him with love. Introducing him as our angel to the in-laws, they were initially surprised, but eventually warmed up to Mark's innocent smile.
It might be hard, but you two will surely overcome everything. If you ever need help, we're here for you.
The in-laws accepted and promised to love and care for him together. Mark's main concerns were managing sunlight exposure and weak vision. When going outside, sunscreen is essential, and Mark also needs assistive devices for his vision. However, now, thanks to the internet, connecting with friends who share the same concerns has lessened the feeling of struggling alone. There are several considerations in Mark's life, but otherwise, he's a healthy and mischievous boy. Kevin and I are delighted to see Mark increasingly doing things on his own. And before we knew it, 4-5 years had flown by. During this time, we visited the in-laws' house for Christmas, long weekends, and whenever the timing was right. The in-laws live about a 10-minute bus ride away, and from the station. Robert always picks us up in his car, mindful of Mark's condition.
Thank you for always picking us up. No problem. I always can't wait to see my grandson.
Once in the car, Mark always brightened up. Certainly, he liked cars, but there was a more pressing issue for him. The stares from others. When on the bus, some people would gawk or recoil at Mark's appearance, whispering or turning away. There were even times when people pointed their phone cameras at him, leading us to ask them to stop and shielding Mark from their view. Such actions deeply saddened me as a mother and sometimes made me angry, wondering why they would do such things. Affected by these stares, Mark would shrink into himself on the bus. Especially since turning 5, he would hide behind me or Kevin, or cling to Robert and Chloe, curling up small. Thinking how hard it must be for Mark himself tightened my chest with pain. One night, before bed, Mark asked, "Mom, Dad, am I weird? Does everyone dislike me? Why would you think that?" I replied, "Because, in the train, everyone looks at me so much." Hearing Mark express his feelings was heart-wrenching, and I've never felt more distressed. Kevin seemed troubled too, his brows slightly furrowed. I pulled Mark close, looked him in the eyes, and assured him, "You're not weird, and nobody dislikes you. Even if people look, you can hold your head high." With tears welling up in his eyes, he listened to my words and simply replied, "Okay, I understand. Mark, how about you sleep with Dad tonight?"
Okay. Read me a story?
Excited, Kevin headed to the bedroom with Mark. Watching them, I stayed in the living room, sighing.
The 50th anniversary celebration for Robert and Chloe is coming up, and I'm a bit worried.
At kindergarten, there are teachers to support and friends who are told about Mark's condition, which offers some comfort,
But public places are a different story. Struggling with this challenge, Mark, Kevin, and I were all searching for solutions, discussing with friends as well. Recently, Kevin brought up the 50th wedding anniversary celebration of the in-laws. Abigail, my sister-in-law living far away, would be coming, and it was suggested we celebrate grandly with her family.
Mark hasn't met Abigail yet. It might be a good opportunity, don't you think, Scarlett? Abigail too?
Truthfully, I didn't have the best impression of Abigail, my sister-in-law. Her family moves often due to her husband's job, and I've only met them once or twice. When Mark was born, I sent a letter but received no reply. Worried they didn't care about our family, I felt anxious about introducing Mark. When I shared my concerns, Kevin reassured me with a smile, "It'll be okay.
Abigail isn't that bad, and her husband has always been nice to me." "Okay,"
I conceded, perhaps overly concerned about others' judgments. Maybe Abigail and her husband are genuinely kind, and the lack of response to my letter was just due to their circumstances. If they're coming all this way to celebrate their parents' 50th anniversary, we shouldn't dismiss their intent. While I could handle any comments about me, I worried whether Mark would be accepted or subjected to stares like on the bus. But we agreed to include Abigail's family. And so, with lingering anxiety, we approached the day of the 50th anniversary celebration. Due to flight schedules, Abigail's family would arrive later. For this special day, instead of Robert's car, Kevin and I escorted the in-laws to a high-end restaurant. Because we had a reservation, I said, "I'm Harper," and the receptionist led us to our room. Robert and Chloe, smiling happily, held Mark's hand as they walked to their seats. The stylish space, fitting about 10 people, was lit with soft lighting, creating a calm atmosphere. "Grandpa and Grandma are happy. I'm happy too." "Yes, Mark is happy too." Mark seemed to understand today was special, smiling more than usual. He was dressed in new clothes bought for the occasion, looking even cuter, which made the staff lady smile. After some time chatting, Abigail's family arrived late. They appeared in formal attire, and Scarlett, Mark's cousin, was also dressed in a cute outfit. "Sorry we're late." "Dad, Mom, congratulations today." Abigail dropped her bag and greeted Robert and Chloe. Of course, Abigail's husband and Scarlett smiled and said, "Congratulations." When they settled, I nervously greeted Abigail's family. Abigail, long time no see. Thank you for coming all this way today." "Ah, right." However, she responded indifferently, as if she barely knew me. Gathering my courage, I brought Mark over to introduce him.
This is my son, Mark." "Say hello, Mark. I'm Mark, 5 years old."
Mark clung to me and shyly greeted Abigail.
"Abigail, as I mentioned in my letter, my son has a congenital disability."
Before I could finish, Abigail bluntly said,
"EW, what a monster. Don't let it spread to us."
Instantly, Mark and I froze as if time had stopped. Abigail's husband, without saying a word, clearly looked uncomfortable, clearly wanting to keep his distance. Kevin and the in-laws were speechless and stiff. I was filled with disbelief at what was said to such a young child. Not knowing what to say to the inconsiderate Abigail, I stood there motionless, but then I was brought back to reality by a voice from beside me. "Do people hate me again?" Mark looked anxious, holding my hand. Laughing, Abigail said,
"Yeah, nobody wants to see your face."
Mark looked down, trying hard not to cry. Such words would hurt an adult, let alone a child. I thought about slapping Abigail right there, but hugged Mark tightly instead.
"What are you saying, Abigail? That's not true." "That's right." "Abigail, how could you say that?"
Chloe hugged me and Mark in defense.
What? Mom, you're defending that monster? It's gross, like, it's all white and has white hair. Is it contagious? Get it away if it's going to spread. It's not contagious. It doesn't spread. He has albinism, a condition of being born with less pigment. So, it is a disease. It could spread. Why did you bring him? Stay away. Scarlett, stay back. Abigail, don't say that. Mark is not a monster, nor is it contagious. Don't treat him like that. Kevin, is that really your child? Unbelievable. Why can't you be more considerate, Abigail? Just get rid of that ugly kid, fast. Get out.
Kevin's hands trembled with anger. During the heated argument, tears streamed down Mark's face. Intervening before Kevin could confront Abigail, Robert spoke up.
Yes, don't ever come back.
Only Abigail and her husband were relieved by those words. Their faces wore a triumphant look, as if to say they have found an ally. But that smile quickly vanished, turning into a look of surprise.
What? Dad, what are you doing?
Robert had grabbed Abigail and her husband's bags and threw them out of the room. Then, after clapping his hands together, he turned back to the astonished couple.
To treat a polite child who greeted you upon meeting for the first time, like this. That's not my daughter. You are the monsters. I don't want to see such ugly faces. But Dad, what if you and Mom catch it? I'm worried. No need to worry. If you had the heart to worry about me, you could have considered Mark's feelings too. Why didn't you? No, come on, that's just not normal, no matter how you look at it. Stop saying such heartless things. Get out now.
Abigail's couple was taken aback by Robert's demeanor, unseen by Kevin and me before. They seemed to want to say something more, but then a voice exclaimed, "Stop it." All eyes, including Kevin's, turned to the source. Surprisingly, it was Scarlett, dressed in her cute outfit. Her cheeks flushed.
Albinism isn't contagious, and he's not a monster. Why would you say that? Dad and Mom, that's awful.
She declared this with all her might, tears streaming down her face. That alone showed she was angry and hurt for Mark, which made me incredibly happy. Yet, Abigail harshly responded to her daughter.
Scarlett, be quiet. You don't know anything. You're the one who doesn't know anything, Mom. I'm so embarrassed right now. Hating Mark without even trying to understand him. I hate you too.
Scarlett's almost shouting voice turned Abigail and her husband pale. Undeterred, Scarlett ran to Mark, towering slightly like an older sister, and gently stroked his head. Don't cry. You should smile. You're not a monster, and you're not disliked. The people who say that are wrong. Okay. Both Scarlett and Mark's faces were smeared with tears and runny noses. It was difficult to get Abigail and her husband to understand Mark, but Scarlett was different, which was reassuring. Seeing Scarlett approach Mark and pat his head, Abigail seemed to snap out of it, hastily leaving with her husband without a word. The commotion drew the attention of other patrons outside, likely making Abigail's family feel unwelcome. While some staff members asked patrons to return to their seats, we resumed our conversation as if nothing had happened. The rest of the meal went smoothly, without tears or derogatory words, marking a peaceful time. After the 50th wedding anniversary celebration ended, and we returned to our usual lives, I was struck by a question. How did Scarlett know about albinism?
Kevin, did you talk to her on the phone? No, I haven't. I thought you had told her, Harper.
Wondering how she knew about Mark without us telling her, we received a letter. The sender was Scarlett, who had apparently gotten our address from Robert and Chloe. The letter, written on cute heart pattern stationery like that of a young girl, contained her earnest words. After dinner that day, we decided to read the letter together. The letter began with "To Mark's mom and dad," sharing Scarlett's personal thoughts on people with albinism. Scarlett, due to her parents' moves, had changed schools several times, about 3 in total. At one of her previous schools, there was a child with albinism similar to Mark. This child had white hair and wore special glasses for poor vision. But after the teacher's explanation, all classmates respected and treated the child well. And Scarlett liked that child. Without discrimination against anyone, not minding their own disability. And being kind to everyone, she found them genuinely cool and fell for them. Even with poor eyesight, they had great hearing, were good at singing, and could play the piano. I wanted to be as kind as them, but Mom was different. On a day when parents gathered, seeing the albino child with Scarlett, Abigail frowned immediately.
Scarlett, who's that child? Dyeing hair in elementary school? And those ugly glasses don't suit at all. You shouldn't play with that child, okay? Understand?
Saying so, she complained. Scarlett was filled with disbelief and felt very upset. Shocked and frustrated at her inability to retort her mother's heartless words. So, I felt relieved when I could finally speak up about Mark. Reading the letter made me feel warm, realizing Scarlett had been harboring those feelings during the 50th wedding anniversary celebration. Later, Scarlett settled in her current school and, driven by a desire to be understood, read an essay on albino awareness during an open class.
My parents labeled my cousin a monster without trying to understand albinism. I think those who say such things have monstrous hearts.
I hope more people understand albinism and refrain from saying terrible things like my parents did. I wish for a class where everyone respects each other as they did at my previous school. The composition she read on open day, advocating for mutual respect, was highly praised. At the same time, Abigail and her husband faced condemning stares and were embarrassed. Following that open day, they were viewed coldly by other parents in the neighborhood, and Scarlett was scolded by Abigail. But she seemed unfazed, hoping to grow up to be someone who can eloquently explain and support people with albinism. Please be kind and stand tall, Mark. I'll do my best too. See you. The letter ended with this message, accompanied by a cartoon character sticker that seemed like it could come from a girl's magazine, saying your ally. Of course, Mark still can't read well, nor does he fully understand the meaning of the words. But when I carefully explained how to read it, Mark, with a happy smile, excitedly shouted, "Ally, ally." Seeing this made both Kevin and I happy, and we all ended up laughing together. In fact, since the day of the 50th wedding anniversary celebration, Mark, perhaps remembering Scarlett's words, has always stood tall, never shrinking, whether on the bus or at kindergarten. What kind of mental change occurred, I'm not sure, but it seems Mark has understood Scarlett's words in his own way. When going to meet the in-laws, as usual, we got on the bus and sat down. Some high school girls who seemed to have finished school early were talking about Mark, covering their mouths but their eyes laughing. What's that? White hair. I was considering changing seats, but then I noticed Mark had also seen the girls and was staring back at them. Mark? When I called out to him, Mark, still looking at the high school girls, smiled back at them. Surprised, perhaps, the girls moved away, flustered. There were other times when we were talked about or stared at, but Mark began to smile back each time. The speakers would feel guilty, stopping their gossip and diverting their attention to their phones. It seems to be Mark's own way of handling situations, though I wondered where he learned such diplomacy. But upon reflection, Scarlett had encouraged him that day, "Don't cry, just smile." Those words must have resonated with Mark. It's not that there are no more people who mock or stare or demean based on appearance. In fact, we'll likely encounter more such people. Seeing Mark not just protected by me, his mom, but protecting himself, made me feel incredibly proud of his growth. Our child is striving to live with strength. Maybe it's thanks to Scarlett. I often think, if only there were more kind-hearted children like Scarlett. Discussing this with friends, I found support among other moms, leading to small educational gatherings in public spaces. If both those directly involved and those around them can understand each other, surely we can connect kind-hearted people and create a slightly kinder world than today. I hope for a world where more people, like Scarlett, understand and treat those with disabilities without discrimination, making it a better place for Mark to live positively.
I'm going to marry your sister. ATM is no longer needed.
I could hear the mocking laughter over the phone. But I didn't let out a surprised sound. I thought if I played into their hands, it would weaken my position. And by now, I had not an iota of love left for my husband, Zach.
Okay, brace yourself.
I replied calmly, but inside, anger was boiling over. Zach, who dumped all the childcare, elder care, and housework on me, was enjoying an affair with my sister, Nicole. And Nicole too, after borrowing all that money from me, she slept with my husband and even called me an ATM at the end. It was unforgivable.
You're okay with us divorcing, right? When Zach pressed me, I simply nodded yes.
On the other end of the phone, the two of them cheered. Enjoy it while you can. There's no way they won't get their comeuppance for belittling me like this. I bit my lip hard. My name is Maggie. I'm 60 years old, living with my husband Zach, who's 5 years my senior. Our son, Alan, is 30 this year, already independent and out of the house. I was working part-time at a grocery store until recently, but due to the recent surge in prices, I was forced into early retirement for cost-cutting. The manager, who was very kind since I worked there for many years, even gave me a severance package despite being part-time. It's a bit sad to retire before reaching the age of retirement, but working at the grocery store definitely helped me grow. So I'm very grateful to the manager who continued to employ me. One might think I'm set for a slow life in retirement, but actually, I'm having some domestic issues. Well, more with Zach than with the household. With our loveless and distant marriage, I'm very anxious about living together for many more years. Why did it come to this? Let me start from the beginning. I met Zach over 40 years ago. Back then, I was a student job hunting, talking to various industry veterans. Most of them were seniors from the newspaper club I was part of. At a club drinking party, many alumni, including Zach, would show up. "Maggie, what kind of company do you want to work for?" Zach, rumored to be the handsome senior in the club, asked me with a comfortable distance. I honestly told him I wanted to work for a stable company. "How about the bank I work at?" "Banking's probably the most stable, right?"
Indeed, it seems like a solid job.
While my response was cliché, I was happy Zach invited me to his bank. Encouraged by Zach, I applied to his bank and got the job. It wasn't too difficult as the bank hired many students from my university. Once I started working at the bank, I realized many women liked him. Zach, always invited out for meals after work, seemed out of reach for me. But Zach often asked me out, and despite feeling guilty towards his other admirers, I started going out with him more as I was interested. So, we started dating and got married 3 years later, after which I quit the bank. It's regretful to quit just after 4 years, but back then, most women quit upon marriage. Especially since Zach and I were in the same workplace, he seemed to prefer I work part-time elsewhere. I had no regrets about marrying Zach and quitting my job. For a while, we enjoyed our life together until I got pregnant and gave birth to our son, Alan, at 30. Zach, who used to treat me like a princess, suddenly became indifferent after the birth.
Zach, can you make a bottle for Alan?
A bottle?
That's a mom's job. Why do I have to do it?
His sudden change in attitude left me more in shock rather than in sadness or anger. I had heard that men sometimes lose interest when their wives give birth. But I thought that was a story for only a small fraction of couples. I never imagined that Zach, who loved me so much, would suddenly cast me aside like throwing something into the open sea after I had our child. From then on, every day was a whirlwind. Zach continued to refuse to help with the baby.
Taking care of the baby is a mom's job. Plus, you're a housewife, so it's natural for you to take care of it.
I'm busy with work. Zach had his plausible reasons, but they didn't satisfy me.
But it's my first time too, and raising the baby alone is hard work.
As I countered while watching Zach's reaction, he glared at me.
If it's that hard, why don't you go to my dad's?
Dad's free and can help you out.
To your father?
Yeah, that's right. I was utterly shocked by Zach's suggestion. Zach's mom had passed away early, and only his dad, Bob, was left, who recently had trouble with his legs and might need to go to a care facility. How could he think of leaving our child with Bob? Moreover, Zach completely refused to be involved with the baby, essentially just dumping it on his parents. Zach's outlandish idea left me troubled. Since then, I received little help from Zach in raising Alan, and I had to do it alone, repeatedly reading childcare books. Fortunately, Alan was a well-behaved and obedient child who listened to me and grew up healthy. When Alan turned 5, after sending him off to kindergarten, I noticed a call on my mobile phone.
Maggie, it looks like Dad collapsed. I'm thinking of putting him in a facility. Can you handle the paperwork? What? Collapsed? Is he okay? And about the facility?
I was very surprised by Zach's call. The news of Bob's collapse was alarming. I hoped he had been taken to the hospital in time. Given Bob's leg condition, it must have been quite a struggle. Bob had always been fond of me, treating me like his own daughter, and I regularly took Alan to visit him, even without Zach asking. The in-laws' house was about a 40-minute drive from our home. Every time we visited, "Thank you for coming all this way," Bob would say with a kind smile. Alan and I both loved Bob and, despite the distance, always wanted to visit him again and again. Hearing that Bob had collapsed, I was filled with anxiety, but Zach only mentioned putting him in a facility in a matter-of-fact tone, which irritated me.
Just handle it. I'm busy with work, okay? Wait a minute.
Zach cut the call quickly after saying his piece. The idea of putting Bob in a facility was unthinkable to me. Unless it was Bob's own wish, it seemed like Zach was just deciding to put him in a facility on his own. After much thought, I decided to take care of Bob myself as soon as he recovered. When I arrived at the hospital where Bob had been sent, he was in the hospital room and had already regained his consciousness. Bob was over 70 but had struggled to continue the family's farming business despite his leg issues. Both Zach and I had asked Bob to rest, but he insisted on going to the field that day.
Maggie, sorry for troubling you.
No, please, just don't strain yourself anymore.
All right.
It seemed Bob had learned his lesson this time and stopped going to the field after being discharged. Bob's field was no longer used for crops, leaving only an empty land. Though it could be revived with care, the land would probably be passed on to Zach, his only son, who I doubted would take up farming. I felt sorry for the neglected field but thought it was for the best if it meant Bob wouldn't strain himself further. After that, I started caring for Bob, visiting the in-laws' house about 3 times a week. I also began working part-time at the grocery store around that time, juggling work, childcare, caregiving, and household chores. For childcare, I switched Alan from kindergarten to daycare with extended hours, managing to make time. I worked 4 mornings a week till after lunch and then went to the in-laws' house. After caring for Bob, I would pick up Alan from daycare, go home, and make dinner. It was very challenging initially due to inexperience. Though it became slightly easier as I got used to it, I didn't realize how tired I was becoming. I had no time to talk to Zach and was overwhelmed just dealing with the tasks at hand. 10 years passed in this manner, and I turned 45, Zach 50. By then, Alan had become a teenager and often rebelled against me. But I saw this as a sign of his growing independence and, while feeling a bit lonely, I was happy about his growth. However, Alan never showed any defiance towards Zach. In fact, he hardly ever spoke to him. Zach had abandoned any childcare responsibilities from Alan's birth, leaving everything to me, so it seemed Alan didn't really think of Zach as his dad. It was around this time that our loveless and distant family relationship reached a critical point. The catalyst was a call from my sister, Nicole.
Hi, Maggie. I just got back from a trip to Hawaii with friends and I've got some souvenirs for you. Can I drop by your place?
Nicole, my elder sister by 3 years, has always been reckless with money and had a fiery temperament, making us quite incompatible. She always wore flashy makeup and was more beautiful than me. I was suspicious of her intention to give me souvenirs but couldn't refuse her kind gesture and agreed. When Nicole came over the weekend, she handed me the souvenirs, which I realized were not from Hawaii and were clearly common sweets available locally. I chose to stay silent, thinking that pointing this out would only upset her.
Hey, Maggie. I'm short on cash this month. Can you lend me some money?
Suddenly visiting with a fake souvenir and now this, I wondered what she was up to.
Lend you money? Why?
I suspected it was just Nicole's usual spending habits leaving her broke.
Well, I've been feeling unwell lately. The doctor said I might need to be hospitalized. But I don't have insurance and can't afford the hospital and treatment costs.
Nicole, sounding feeble, left me speechless. What kind of illness required hospitalization? I silently stared at Nicole, who looked at me pleadingly.
Okay. Just pay me back after your treatment.
Thanks. Sisters are the best. Nicole's face lit up as she shook my hand. Despite our differences, she was my sister and I wanted her to get well soon if she was ill. By the way, when is Zach getting back? Once Nicole knew I'd lend her the money, she casually asked this.
Zach just went to the grocery store.
Oh, I see. I'll just say hi then and leave. Right then, the front door opened and Zach returned. Hey, Zach. Oh, Nicole. You're here. Yes, just had something to discuss with Maggie. But I'm done now and will be leaving. As Nicole stood up and passed by Zach, she seemed to whisper something in his ear. After Nicole left.
What did Nicole say to you earlier?
I asked, but
nothing important.
Zach evaded the question. I remained curious but soon forgot about it. The discovery of Zach and Nicole's affair happened a month later. I planned to visit Bob that day, but work got extended, so I postponed my visit to the in-laws' house to the next day and went home as usual. Alan was at the library, so only Zach should have been home.
Why are there women's shoes here?
As I took off my shoes at the entrance, I noticed a familiar pair of heels. They were the high heels Nicole wore over the weekend. Entering the house, the living room was empty, which relieved me momentarily. But then, from the bedroom, I heard faint, indiscreet voices of Zach and Nicole.
What are they doing?
I considered confronting them right then, but hesitated at the last moment. What if Zach demands a divorce after being exposed? Alan wouldn't want to live with Zach. But I wasn't confident I could afford Alan's education fees alone. If we were to divorce, I wanted to wait until Alan had graduated from college. Frustrated, I decided to leave the house, pretending I saw nothing. Instead, I gathered evidence of the affair, taking photos of their traces and secretly saving the exchanges between Zach and Nicole from his mobile phone. It appeared they had been having an affair for about 6 months. Despite the anger boiling inside me, I reminded myself it was for Alan and endured, not exposing the affair. Another 15 years have passed since then, and Alan is now part of the working world. After graduating from college and leaving his first job early, Alan set up his own business and is now working hard as its president. And as the story goes, I had retired from the grocery store, but I was working a little at Alan's company. I had been giving Nicole money for her treatment bit by bit, but when her requests became too persistent, I grew reluctant to lend more and started ignoring her calls. In fact, the signs of Nicole and Zach's affair had disappeared about a year after it came to light. Zach probably got bored of Nicole. He changed his mind and chose to stay married to me. Knowing this, I couldn't bring myself to pursue the matter of the affair anymore and decided to pretend it never happened. But I realized my naivety when I heard about Bob's death. I got the news about Bob from Zach during the day. Bob had lived a long life until 95, but I was deeply shocked by the loss of Bob, who I had cared for so long. Bob, unlike Zach, was kind and considerate, so his passing felt like losing my own parent. Yet even then, Zach said,
"Dad seems to have accumulated a lot of wealth, so that's exciting."
Laughing. I was so angry that I thought of giving Zach a piece of my mind, but then I heard a woman's laughter from nearby. Oops, did she realize we're together? I was chilled to the bone at the sound of Nicole's voice. Had Nicole and Zach's relationship not ended after all? For 15 years, they had continued their affair without my knowledge. Realizing this, they seemed like an incomprehensible entity to me.
"I'm going to marry your sister. ATM is no longer needed."
I could hear the mocking laughter over the phone. But I didn't let out a sound of surprise. I thought if I played into their hands, it would weaken my position, and by now, I had not an iota of love left for Zach.
"Okay, brace yourself,"
I replied calmly, but inside, anger was boiling over. Zach, who dumped all the childcare, elder care, and housework on me, was enjoying an affair with Nicole. And Nicole too, after borrowing all that money from me, she slept with my husband and even called me an ATM at the end. It was unforgivable.
"You're okay with us divorcing, right?" When Zach pressed me, I simply nodded yes.
On the other end of the phone, the two of them cheered. Enjoy it while you can. There's no way they won't get their comeuppance for belittling me like this. I bit my lip hard. After Bob's funeral, I filed for divorce as promised. When I informed Zach, he seemed so delighted that it felt like he was doing it on purpose.
"Now that we're divorced, you should leave this house as soon as possible."
Me leave? I asked, surprised, and Zach nodded as if it were obvious.
"I'm going to live with Nicole, and you'll be living alone. This house is too big for one person."
Anger turned to disbelief, and I said, "Okay." Too weary to argue, and agreed to Zach's demands. Though upset, I had already considered my living situation before the divorce. Leaving our home, I headed to Alan's, who was living independently. I had contacted Alan beforehand, and he welcomed his mom, who had just left Zach, with open arms. He's truly a kind son. I resolved to work even harder at Alan's company. A few days later, a man claiming to be a lawyer contacted me. When I went to the specified location, Zach, Nicole, and the lawyer were seated.
"I am in possession of a will left by Zach's dad,"
the lawyer said, and took out the will signed by Bob from his bag. I was surprised as I didn't know Bob had left a will. As Zach's only child, he was the legal heir to Bob's assets. Being no longer Zach's wife, I had no claim to any inheritance. Why was I called then? As I wondered, the lawyer read the will. Its contents were astounding. Bob had left half of his assets to me. That meant the field Bob owned was now part of my estate. While Zach would inherit the other half due to his legal share, he had surely not expected me to inherit anything.
"Why does Maggie get half of the inheritance? I'm his only son, I should receive it all." Dad was very grateful to Maggie for her selfless care, even though they were not related by blood. He meant it as a thank you. Bob.
I was deeply moved by Bob's thoughtfulness.
"What the heck is this? I thought we could finally relax with the inheritance."
Nicole twisted her face in frustration. The lawyer then mentioned that Bob's will had also left all of his debts to Zach, but it seemed Zach and Nicole were too upset to hear that part. I was overwhelmed with gratitude towards Bob, and before I knew it, tears were streaming down my face.
Thank you, Bob.
Seeing me in tears, the two of them seemed to grow even angrier, but the lawyer concluded.
That is the content of the will.
With that, Zach and Nicole seemed to snap back to reality.
I'm not happy about losing half, but hey, we still have half of the inheritance left. Gotta thank the law for that. Zach said as he patted Nicole's shoulder, who nodded in agreement. Right. Well, we'll be leaving now. We won't have anything to do with you anymore, so take care. They laughed loudly as they left.
I returned to Alan's house, savoring Bob's last act of kindness. After receiving the inheritance from Bob, I continued working at Alan's place without incident, and before I knew it, 2 months had passed. That's when Zach called me, on a Sunday. Alan and I were both off work, relaxing at home, but my mobile phone started ringing insistently.
Zach!
The air froze between me and Alan as we realized it was Zach calling.
Why is Dad calling? He abandoned you, and now what does he want? You don't have to answer.
Alan said so, but the phone kept ringing persistently. Irritated, I decided to answer to silence Zach.
What is it, calling me repeatedly? You said we wouldn't have anything to do with each other ever again.
I answered with a tone of annoyance, but Zach seemed not to hear me and started talking frantically.
Hey, what's going on? Why are you working at Alan's company? And why is Alan's company being featured on TV? And what's with showing your fancy house?
Zach's near hysterical voice echoed through the phone, causing Alan to frown.
You saw the TV.
I realized why Zach was calling all of a sudden. Recently, a TV station had interviewed Zach's gym, and it was broadcast yesterday. Alan's gym, which combines a gym and cafe, had caught the TV station's interest due to its novelty. Since opening, the gym had rapidly increased its membership, and Alan appeared on TV as a successful young entrepreneur, even showcasing our home as Zach mentioned. The house we live in now, Alan's home, is quite luxurious, far surpassing the neighboring houses in size. So Zach saw Alan's house and was shocked enough to call.
What do you mean you guys are living in such a big house? Over here, Nicole used up all of Dad's inheritance, and I even got left with his debts. Damn it, I didn't hear about that from the lawyer back then.
Zach yelled angrily over the phone. But back then, the lawyer did mention that Bob had left all his debts to Zach. It wasn't my fault that Zach had not listened, and it was none of my business.
It's none of my business, Zach. The lawyer clearly mentioned it, and it's your responsibility for not paying attention. Besides, you knew about Nicole's spending habits even before marrying her, right? I gave her money for treatment and haven't been repaid yet. This just proves to me that you and Nicole are the worst kind of people, quick to betray someone you should trust.
In response to my correct argument, Zach remained silent, unable to say anything.
Besides, isn't it all your fault for cheating on me in the first place? I just don't understand why I have to be blamed.
I let out my pent-up frustrations, feeling somewhat relieved. Realizing he couldn't blame me, Zach suddenly changed his tone to a pleading one. Please, Maggie. I'm begging you, lend me some money.
I was supposed to get a retirement fund this year, but I got fired, and all I'm left with are Dad's debts.
Nicole left after we argued about money. How am I supposed to live now? You're my only hope.
I admit I was wrong about everything.
I apologize.
Just give me a little bit of Dad's inheritance.
You're living a good life with Alan, right? Think of it as helping someone out, okay? His nerve to beg his ex-wife for money after cheating and leaving her was beyond comprehension. Alan, who had been listening to the conversation, looked at me, seemingly wanting to say something. I handed my mobile phone to Alan. Alan turned on the speaker and firmly said to Zach,
Dad, You betrayed Mom and married Nicole, right? And I heard you never took care of me since I was born. I don't have any memories of playing with you after I became aware. It was always just Mom and me. On Parents' Day and Sports Day, it was always just Mom who came. That's why I'm helping Mom with my company and living with her. Why should I, who you never did anything for, lend you money? My only parent is Mom. I won't give you a single dollar.
Alan's strong, businesslike tone choked me up. I could sense Zach gasping on the other end of the phone.
Alan, how could you say that to your dad? Fine, I won't rely on you guys ever again. Don't insult me.
With that, Zach hung up. We looked at the silent mobile phone and then burst out laughing together.
Zach begged us for money, and now he says he won't have anything to do with us. What an idiot. Yeah. Dad has always been like that, getting angry without thinking ahead.
As we discussed Zach's foolishness, the phone rang again. It was Zach. He probably wanted to ask for money, despite saying he wouldn't contact us again. Fed up, I blocked Zach's contact.
That's it. Now that fool can't bother us anymore. Yeah. Thanks, Mom.
His gratitude for being raised seemed implicit.
I should be the one thanking you. You've given me such a great life. No matter how old you get, you're still my precious son.
We reaffirmed our bond as mother and son, grateful for each other's presence in our spacious home. A few days later, my sister Nicole called me. Her request was almost identical to what Zach had said. I couldn't fathom lending more money to Nicole, who hadn't even repaid what she owed me. In fact, I hadn't yet demanded compensation for her affair with Zach, so I successfully sued both of them for damages through a lawyer. They ended up getting divorced after being married. Their marriage only lasted for 2 months. Zach was even worse off than Nicole. The negative inheritance he received from Dad was too substantial. Bob had borrowed a lot of money for farming, managing it all by himself. I hadn't known about it. While caring for Bob, he often complained about Zach. Bob was able to forgive Zach for not taking over the farming business, but the fact that he didn't take care of Alan and not visit his own father was unforgivable. He was also furious with the way Zach treated me, and I always tried to soothe him, saying it was okay. If kind Bob was that angry, Zach must have been quite a negligent son. All of Zach's expected retirement funds were gone due to his dismissal for misconduct. Rumor has it he even tried to embezzle money from his bank to pay off his debts. Had he just worked quietly until the end, he would have received his retirement money. His greed was his downfall. Now, while receiving a pension, he seems to be working 3 part-time jobs to pay off his debts. Starting a new job at 65 and being taught by younger people as a newcomer must be shattering his pride. Although he has worked as a bank employee for many years, his part-time job as a new employee involves a lot of odd jobs. A hard adjustment for someone who never did housework, childcare, or elder care. He'll likely give up soon enough. For Zach, who neglected his son and cheated with Nicole for years, it's a fitting punishment. I hope he manages until the end. As for me, I'm still working energetically at Alan's workplace. The staff, who are around my child's age, treat me very kindly. Our workplace is always full of smiles, attracting many customers. Alan recently got engaged to a girl a year younger than him and introduced her to me. She's a wonderful, sensible young lady. Well respected at work. I was planning to move out when they married, but she insisted we live together. I'm grateful for her kindness and looking forward to our future together.
The obstetrician told us to get checked out in more detail and gave us a referral. We might become parents. Daniel would be happy, I thought. That's what I was thinking. But Daniel's words were different from what I had imagined. Huh? Seriously? Daniel looked perplexed and sighed as if it were a bother. What's wrong? We've been wanting a child for so long. Aren't you happy? Pregnant? I don't know anything about that. Please just stop talking. Do you plan on having a kid and spending even more money when you're living off me? Who do you think is providing for our living? It's thanks to me working overtime and on weekends, right? I was dumbfounded by his patronizing tone. I had been so happy about the long-awaited pregnancy, but it quickly felt like I had been dropped into hell. I don't want to come home to a messy house and the sound of a crying child. There's no point in being married to you if you're pregnant. Get out of the house. Hearing those words, I felt foolish for having endured so much until now. I remained silent and went to my room to start packing my things. I am Scarlett, a working mother who works from home. I live with my husband Daniel, who is 2 years older than me. Even while balancing work, I have managed to take care of the household to relieve my husband's fatigue. We've been married for 5 years. When you're together for a long time, you start to see the less appealing sides of each other. I was no exception. Daniel often leaves the house citing work as the reason. He frequently works overtime and has to work on weekends almost every week. I was worried about Daniel's health. Hey, you've been working overtime a lot lately, haven't you? Are you okay? Yeah, but it can't be helped. It's tough for everyone, not just me. I can't just not do overtime and go home, right? That might be true, but I'm worried you might overwork yourself. Can't you at least take weekends off? Nah, that's impossible. If I don't work on weekends, it just means more work on weekdays. It's better to get things done when other companies are off, right? I understand what you're saying, but can't you take even one day off? I want to spend more time with you. Daniel gave a resigned look and glanced at me as he had said this. You're always at home, so maybe you don't understand about work. There are times when a man has to stand firm, and that time is now. Haven't you ever heard of workplace reform? I was appalled by his statement, which was so out of touch with the times. Besides, don't get jealous at your age. It's one thing if it's a young girl, but there's nothing pleasing about a 36-year-old woman getting jealous. I was speechless at Daniel's harsh words. Is this how you talk to a wife who's worried about you? I had to speak up. That's no way to talk. What's wrong with being worried about a husband who works too much? Ah, enough already. I don't want to come home tired and listen to my wife nag. Besides, don't complain when you're living off me. Daniel left the living room, clearly irritated. I was just thinking about Daniel, so why did I have to be spoken to like this? I was becoming unsure of how to deal with Daniel. On a day off? Even though Daniel had the whole day off, it wasn't to spend time with me. It was to go to Daniel's parents' house. Daniel's parents lived about a 30-minute drive away. Daniel had a good relationship with his in-laws, especially his mother Ella, who was very sweet on Daniel. Daniel would do anything Ella asked. I didn't get along well with Ella. Daniel's father, Logan, was a sensible man who would sometimes rein in Ella when she went too far. He was kind to me, his daughter-in-law. However, Logan was a busy company president and often away from home. Daniel worked for the company Logan ran. Oh, Daniel, welcome back. Come on in. I'm home, Mom. Ella only addressed Daniel and ignored me as if it were the most natural thing. Daniel didn't seem to question the situation at all. Long time no see, Ella. When I initiated the conversation, Ella seemed to notice me for the first time and said, Oh, did Scarlett come too? As she said that, Ella walked into the house with Daniel, leaving me behind. Then Logan appeared at the entrance, apologizing to me as he came. I'm sorry, Scarlett. It's good to see you. Come in. It's been a while, Logan. Thanks for having me. Watching Daniel and Ella chatting on the sofa in the living room, Logan scolded them. Why did you two go ahead and leave Scarlett behind? It's only proper to show her in together. Well, I did call out. She could have just come in on her own. It's not right to just walk into your husband's family home on your own. We invited her, so we should be considerate. You should understand, being a wife yourself. Dad, don't be so hard on Mom. She was just happy to see me back. Maybe she just got a little carried away. I can't understand being so overjoyed just because an adult son comes home once in a while. Logan shook his head and apologized to me again. However, Daniel and Ella looked as if they didn't understand what they did wrong, and ultimately, they didn't apologize to me. As I was about to sit on the sofa, Ella called out to me, with a smile that was unsettlingly pleasant. Scarlett, could you help me make some coffee? Sure. I followed Ella to the kitchen. As soon as we were alone, the smile disappeared from Ella's face, and she spoke to me in a low voice. Come on, hurry up and make the coffee, and make sure you prepare the cookies properly. Whenever I visited my in-laws, Ella would push household chores onto me, especially when Logan wasn't looking. She knew she'd be scolded by Logan if he found out she was making me do all the work. Such a cunning person. But this was nothing new to me. I was used to it by now. While I prepared the coffee, Ella continued to criticize me nonstop. My clumsiness, the cookies not being to her taste, my unfortunate-looking face. She would list these complaints and finally conclude with, "Really? I wonder why Daniel married someone like you." It's astonishing how she can tirelessly complain about me every time. At first, I was shocked by every comment, but after 5 years of the same, I seem to have become numb to it. For minor things, I just apologize with a simple, "I'm sorry," and let it go in one ear and out the other. Perhaps my lack of reaction was boring for Ella, as she continued her tirade against me. "It's been 5 years since you got married and you still don't have children. Could it be that you're infertile?" My body tensed up instantly. This was something I had always been sensitive about. I had wanted children since the beginning of my marriage. Her blunt mention of such a delicate topic made me struggle to contain my anger. Noticing my reaction, Ella seemed to decide to press the issue further. "Daniel is our only son. Isn't it the wife's duty to produce an heir? Don't you even understand that?" "Well, I do want children, but children are a blessing, and I don't want to hear excuses. If you can't fulfill your duty as a wife, you're not fit to be Daniel's wife. You might as well get a divorce." Just as I was about to retort to her insensitive remarks, Logan entered the kitchen. "It seems to be taking a while. What's going on?" "Oh, Father, it's nothing. I'm just about to bring the coffee." Pretending as if she had prepared it herself, Ella snatched the tray from me and took the coffee and cookies to the living room. "Scarlett, are you okay? Did Ella say something to you again?" "No, I'm fine." It seemed Logan hadn't heard our conversation. The thought of bringing it up again was too painful for me. I answered Logan with a forced smile, suppressing my anger. As if nothing had happened, Ella was chatting amiably with Daniel. The coffee I drank while looking at Ella's face tasted like nothing. I wanted to leave as soon as possible. That thought kept running through my mind. Months had passed since that visit to my in-laws. Daniel was still bogged down with overtime and working weekends. Lately, I had been feeling unwell, hardly able to get out of bed. I managed to keep up with the essential household chores, but it seemed Daniel hadn't noticed any difference from before. His obliviousness was a relief at this moment. After several days of feeling unwell, I decided it was time to visit the doctor. At the local clinic, I received unexpected news from the doctor. That evening, as I warmed up dinner for Daniel, who returned home late, I decided to speak up. "Hey, there's something I need to talk to you about." "What is it? Does it have to be today? I'm tired from work." Despite claiming to be working even on days off, he's never at home. I almost said that, but held back at the last moment. I didn't respond to Daniel's question. I continued speaking without addressing it. "I'd been feeling unwell for a few days, so I went to the local clinic today. They said I might be pregnant." "What?" Daniel's eyes widened as he looked at me. This way, I won't have to endure any nagging from Ella. Thinking this, I felt a bit relieved. "They told me to get a thorough checkup at the obstetrician's and gave me a referral. We might become parents." I thought Daniel would be happy. That's what I was thinking. But his response was not what I had imagined. "Huh? Seriously?" Daniel frowned and sighed as if it were a bother. "What's wrong? We've been wanting a child for so long. Aren't you happy?" "Pregnant? I don't know anything about that. Please just stop talking." "Why would you say that? You know I've wanted children since we got married, right?" Daniel sighed deeply again. I was the one who wanted to sigh. "You're living off me, and now you want to have a child and spend even more money? Who do you think is providing for us? It's because I'm working overtime and on weekends, right?" I was stunned by his patronizing tone. I had been so happy about the long-awaited pregnancy, but his words quickly dashed that happiness. "I don't want to come home to a messy house and the sound of a crying child. There's no point in being married to you if you're pregnant. Get out of the house." Hearing those words made all the patience I had maintained until then feel foolish. I remained silent and went to my room to start packing my things. After that, I moved quickly. I found a place to move into, arranged for movers, and sent all my belongings to the new home. Within a week, I had completed the move, left the divorce papers I had filled out, and left the house. The next day, I received a message from Daniel saying he had filed the divorce papers. All the time I had spent enduring felt wasted. The 5 years of marriage ended just like that. About 6 months after the divorce, Daniel called me. I was at work and didn't notice until later, but there were over 20 missed calls from him just in the morning. There had been a few calls from him every few weeks before, but I had no desire to talk to someone I had divorced and had ignored them. However, this many missed calls was unprecedented. It might have been an emergency, I thought, and decided to call Daniel back. He answered after just one ring. "You finally picked up. You're late." The first thing I heard when he answered was Daniel shouting. I regretted calling back immediately. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" "What do you mean? I don't understand what you're talking about." "Don't lie. It's about the rent. I got a call saying it's been half a year of unpaid rent. And the utilities, too. What's going on?" His absurd accusation almost made me laugh. This wasn't something you discuss with an ex-spouse. If you're getting notices, just pay them. Why are you calling me about this? "It was supposed to be deducted from my account all this time, right? Why did you change the account as soon as you left? Such harassment. You really have a terrible personality." Of course. I made it so it couldn't be deducted from that account anymore. Why should I pay for rent and utilities for a house I don't even live in anymore? There was silence on the other end of the phone. Daniel was probably filled with question marks in his head by my unexpected response. "Huh? Did you just say you were the one paying for our living expenses?" Daniel finally started talking in a condescending tone. "Don't joke around. I was the one providing for you. There's no way you could afford that." "What are you talking about? Thinking you were providing for me is a huge misunderstanding. Your salary alone couldn't possibly support the both of us living as adults." "Huh? What are you saying? I'm the son of the president. My income is obviously high." High income just because he's the president's son? What kind of logic is that? It was time to confront him with reality. "Have you ever looked at your own payslip? Why don't you check it right now? Then we'll talk." Daniel seemed to be getting irritated with my rebuttals. He said he'd check and seemed to go look for his payslip. "It just so happens it's payday this week. Wait, I'll check right now." His voice suddenly cut off, so I checked my phone signal. It was fine. It seemed Daniel had suddenly gone silent. "Huh? What's this amount? What's going on?" "For some reason, your salary is significantly lower compared to others your age." Daniel seemed unable to accept reality, murmuring "no way" and "can't be" on the other end. Uncertain if he was listening, I continued, "Yet you lived in an upscale apartment and splurged on brand items, thinking you're the president's son. With such spending, it's no wonder you couldn't afford living expenses or rent." "No, I have to wear things befitting the son of a president." "What's the point of buying things that don't match your salary? This is what happens when you don't face reality." "Hey, life must be tough for you since our divorce, right? Let's remarry, and you can come back to live with me." Daniel said something outrageously rude while laughing foolishly. After all the belittling, which mouth was he speaking from? I firmly and clearly retorted, "There's no way I'd remarry someone as unreasonable as you. My work is going well, so don't worry. I'm enjoying my life a lot more without you. Please don't bother me." "Your work? Acting all high and mighty. It must be just some part-time job, right? Living on your own must be just scraping by. You'd be better off with me." "It's not a part-time job. I've been working from home even before we divorced. I'm sure I told you. You don't remember anything I say, do you?" "Work from home? I've never heard about that. Besides, you probably only make pocket money anyway. Anyway, let's remarry." I cut off Daniel's words, seemingly desperate for reconciliation, with a statement that would further plunge him into despair. "I've started my own business." "Business?" "Yes, that's right. The company is doing well and we're seeing good results, so I have absolutely no need to remarry you." The fact that his ex-wife, whom he thought he was supporting, was actually a successful entrepreneur and a president of her own company must have been a blow to Daniel's pride, especially given his complacency about being the son of a president. I felt a sense of vindication after being belittled for so long. However, the next words from Daniel were unexpected. "A president, huh? You said your business is doing well, so you must have plenty of money. Then you can pay for my living expenses, right?" I was astounded by the lack of pride in Daniel's words, coming from someone who was supposed to be so full of it. It's surprising how people can act so desperately when they're out of options. We're divorced, remember? We have nothing to do with each other. I'm not going to pay money for someone who's a stranger to me now. Wait, Scarlett. There's nothing more to talk about. Don't call me again over such nonsense. Goodbye. Daniel seemed to be saying something on the other end, but I mercilessly hung up the phone. There were a few more attempts from him to call, but of course I didn't respond. Eventually, he seemed to give up, and the calls stopped. Looking at the quiet mobile phone, I felt relieved. I wonder how much time has passed since I spoke with Daniel on the phone. My days have been so hectic that I can't even remember such details. My phone rang again, and without checking the screen, I answered it, resolving to always check the caller in the future, no matter how busy I was. It was Daniel on the line, sounding upset as usual. There's a rumor going around the office that I'm cheating. You must have done something for revenge. Look, I'm too busy to bother with someone I want nothing to do with. It wasn't me. That's impossible. Only you would benefit from such a thing. Spreading false rumors. I'll demand compensation from you. It all came down to him wanting to squeeze some money out of me. Giving money to such a person would be like throwing it away. I would never comply with such a demand. I decided to respond in a purposefully frivolous manner. Ah, could it be because of that? You have an idea about it? It was you after all. Of course I haven't been spreading any rumors, but I did consult Logan, your company's president, about your affairs. What? You told Dad? Daniel asked me in a flustered manner. Perhaps he thought I hadn't caught on. Or was it the shock that my father knew about the situation? Either way, it didn't matter to me. Before I brought up the pregnancy issue to Daniel, I had been suspicious of his frequent overtime and weekend work. Logan was often busy with work, and it was common for him not to be at his home when I visited. However, I couldn't imagine Logan, a reasonable man, forcing his son or any employee to work excessive overtime or weekends. So I hired a detective to investigate Daniel's activities. As expected, Daniel was having an affair with a female colleague. The other person was a female colleague from the same company. It was one thing if it was just Daniel, but with the affair involving another employee, I had no choice but to inform Logan, the president. I sent various pieces of evidence to the company addressed to the president. It's likely that Logan took some action, which led to the rumors spreading within the company. I can't believe Dad knows. What have you done? Don't get mad at me. If you hadn't had an affair in the first place, none of this would have happened. I owed a lot to Logan. I couldn't overlook an employee blatantly having an affair. You're meddling in things you shouldn't. Damn, my position is... Why he clung to a position that didn't even pay enough to support one wife was beyond me. It was a waste of time to keep listening to Daniel muttering to himself. I hung up the phone. A few days later, I received a call from Logan. Scarlett, it's been a while. Do you have a moment? Long time no see. Yes, I'm available. I see. Well, I'm terribly sorry for the trouble my foolish son has caused. No, Logan, you're not to blame. Daniel is the one at fault. That may be so, but I also believe there was a lack of oversight on my part. I'm truly sorry for making you uncomfortable. It was exasperating that Daniel had caused Logan, a man of integrity, to apologize like this. Neither in the previous phone call nor in this one did Daniel himself apologize. It's truly unfortunate for a parent to have to apologize for their grown child's actions. Given the affair within the company, we had to impose severe sanctions. The woman involved was demoted and transferred to another department, and Daniel has been dismissed. Dismissed? Excuse me, but is dismissal a common consequence for an internal affair? It's not just about this incident. Scarlett, were you aware of Daniel's salary? Yes, but he mostly spent it as he pleased, hardly contributing to the household. Unbelievable. That boy never ceases to amaze me. Well, there's a reason for the amount of his salary. Logan sighed before gently asking if I was willing to listen. Of course, I agreed. The thing is, he strutted around using the fact that he was the president's son, but hardly did any work. He even threatened those who opposed him with complaints to me, the president. I suspected there was a reason behind that salary amount, but I never imagined it would be this bad. I hadn't realized he was such a self-centered person. It was a relief to have divorced such a self-centered person. It would be wrong to pay him a high salary just because he's my son, given his behavior. That's why his salary was what it was. It's admirable of you, Logan, but it's exactly what using someone else's power for personal gain means. Logan laughed heartily at that. Exactly. I don't regret my decision as a president. However, it seems to have shocked Daniel. He's come back home but has been shut away in his room ever since. You don't need to worry about it, Scarlett. With that, Logan ended the call. While I felt sorry for Daniel, I also felt guilty for causing trouble for Logan. Not even a month after my conversation with Logan, I received a message from Ella. It was a demand to come to my in-laws' house. The message was terse. To me, my in-laws' house felt like enemy territory. I wanted to avoid it if at all possible. However, there were things I wanted to discuss directly with Ella. After contacting Logan, he assured me he would be home, so I decided to visit my in-laws. Oh, you came. Ella opened the entrance door with a blank expression, not bothering to welcome me in, but instead quickly retreated into the house herself. As usual, he didn't invite me in, but hurried into the room by himself. When I was his wife, such behavior puzzled me, but now there's no need for me to gauge Ella's mood. Following Ella, I entered the house. In the living room, only Ella was present, with Logan nowhere to be seen. Is it just you here? Yes, I sent my husband out for groceries. Daniel won't come out of his room because of you. Poor thing. Without offering me any coffee, Ella seated herself on the sofa, merely glancing at me. She knew that if Logan were here, he wouldn't tolerate her treating me disrespectfully. She must have sent Logan away on purpose. Always the cunning one. I sat down on a dining chair a bit away from her. Why did you call me here? Ella frowned at my direct approach. Likely annoyed at being forced to follow my lead in the conversation. It's simple, Scarlett. Remarry Daniel. Stunned by these unexpected words from Ella, whom I thought despised me. I wondered what her reasoning could be for wanting her son to remarry someone she disliked. No, there is no chance of reconciliation with Mr. Daniel. Moreover, I don't believe this is a matter for you to discuss. But look at what you've done to Daniel. He's so distraught he can't even leave his room, let alone the house. You should take responsibility for that. Whether Daniel had misrepresented the facts or Ella had misconstrued them was irrelevant. The truth was entirely different. Daniel betrayed me first. He threw me out when I mentioned I might be pregnant and had an affair with a woman from his company. That's unforgivable. Ella reacted to something I said. Her expression was as if she had an aha moment. Exactly. You're pregnant, aren't you? Do you intend to let your child live a life without a father? It's better for a child to have both parents together. No, that's not necessary. When I firmly refused, Ella's face turned red, and she slammed her hand on the table. What's with you? Defiant and insolent since you got here. A wife should listen to her mother-in-law. Ella screamed in a shrill voice that hurt my ears. A man like that isn't worth my time. And for the record, I'm not pregnant. What? Ella's expression became a mix of confusion and sadness when she heard I wasn't pregnant. What do you mean? Weren't you told at the hospital that you were pregnant? That's what Daniel said. The clinic I went to wasn't an obstetrics and gynecology specialist, so they gave me a referral to get a detailed examination. It turned out to be just a health issue, not a pregnancy. I see. Ella's face fell into complete despair. She must have been planning to use the child as a reason to push for a reconciliation with Daniel. Such naive thinking. I wouldn't want to raise a child with someone who couldn't even be happy about a pregnancy. So there's no need to worry about the child's father. I won't be remarrying Daniel. What? What do you mean? Do you no longer care about Daniel? Don't you feel sorry for him? I feel nothing for him. He's a stranger to me now. Ella lunged at me. I was struck. That's when Logan intervened. What are you doing? Logan had returned from shopping and stepped between Ella and me. But Logan, she's terrible. She won't even try to help Daniel. She only cares about herself. What a cruel person. The one who acted dishonorably first was Daniel. How many times do I have to say it? You lose sight of everything when it comes to Daniel and act recklessly. That's your problem. Enough is enough. Ella burst into tears as if her emotions had exploded. Her blind maternal love had created a codependent relationship between Daniel and her. Even after Daniel became independent, moved out, and started his own family, they couldn't let go of their distorted affection for each other. I felt pity for them. Logan, Ella, I'm here today to tell you directly that I will be filing for compensation against Daniel and his affair partner in the divorce court. Ella continued to scream at me, but her voice was choked with tears, making it hard to understand her words. It was undoubtedly more abuse directed at me. Yes, that's right. Of course. Please proceed with that. I'll cover Daniel's part and promise to pay in full up front. After that, I'll ensure he repays me. I won't let his mother interfere, so you can rest assured. Logan remained my ally to the end. Ella continued to rant incoherently. When Logan thundered, "If you continue to spoil Daniel, I'll consider divorce. Change your ways." Ella finally bowed her head in silence. Despite all the commotion, Daniel never showed his face. Later, through my lawyer, I filed for compensation against Daniel and his affair partner in the divorce court. Both were paid in full. According to Logan, Daniel started working part-time and has been repaying him a fixed amount every month. I've threatened to transfer the debt if he's ever late, so there haven't been any delays so far. Logan said this with a laugh. It seems Ella tried to work and give the money to Logan out of pity for Daniel, but Logan's threat of divorce made her behave. Both Daniel and Ella need to reconsider their actions. While Logan's ordeal is immeasurable, I hope they come to possess a sense of common decency like Logan. As for me, work is going well, and I continue to lead a busy life. Having Logan, a seasoned president, as a sounding board for business matters has been incredibly reassuring. For now, I plan to enjoy a carefree single life to the fullest.